Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326, Charming Witch, Die? Dead shit sighed as he gazed at Rick Flag, his eyes wide open, lying dead on the ground. He'd fought for ages. Though his marksmanship wasn't as good, his wits were sharp, and despite the disadvantage, he fought bravely. From a mercenary's perspective, he was a worthy opponent. However, his superior marksmanship, battlefield awareness, and quick thinking didn't help him defeat the insanely powerful yellow man. With a simple flick of his finger, he was instantly reduced to a corpse. His painstakingly trained skills hadn't even been put to use. His death was swift and swift. He sighed, feeling sorry for his respected opponent. However, Deadshit had seen countless people die before him, and this wasn't enough to sway him. He pulled out his phone and took a few photos to prove he'd killed the man so he could return and collect his pay. He felt similar to Deathstroke, especially after witnessing Thea's dominance. He was convinced he was just a bystander. Now that he had a victory, he could return and collect his pay. Just as he was about to leave, he stumbled upon the Enchantress's severed left arm. The freeze gun was incredibly effective, and wisps of black vapor still emanated from the arm's broken section, especially against the transparent ice. Take it. He hadn't decided yet whether to keep it as a trophy or hand it over to the Sky Eye Society, but taking it back was the right thing to do. Regardless of how Deadshit would extract the arm from the ice, Thea, desperately blocked by Rick Flag, took even longer to catch up this time. Unfortunately, Rick Flag's sacrifice was meaningless. The Enchantress's strength was severely weakened, and she could no longer maintain her high-frequency teleportation. The distance she teleported was decreasing, and the time between each teleport was growing longer. The high consumption of both her stamina and magicka forced her to pause and rest after each teleportation, even though she knew Thea was pursuing her. Damn it, the Enchantress rested for less than 10 seconds before Thea caught up. The two engaged in a back-and-forth exchange, Thea remaining largely intact, while Thea was barely at 30% of her peak strength. As Thea witnessed it more and more, the Enchantress's teleportation had revealed many secrets. Although her spells leaned more towards sorcery, Thea's were magic, but they achieved the same end. After this battle, Thea believed that after reviewing the situation, Thea's special magic would reach new heights. I told you to run, so I told you to run. Thea no longer engaged in close combat with her. This creature's teleportation was truly unpredictable, and engaging her in close combat was a sheer waste of time. Her freezing gun wasn't fast enough, so the best weapon to deal with her was a divine longbow equipped with light magic arrows. Flying 20 meters above the ground, he drew his bow and arrow, ready to fire an arrow if she showed her head. Thea felt a bit like she was riding a skateboard across Gotham that day. Boom, dang, the sounds echoed in quick succession, and the route they passed looked like it had been bombed, with huge craters everywhere. Perhaps the future urban reconstruction would bring more business to the Quinn Corporation. Damn rat, you're dead. Thea was shooting with great pleasure when she suddenly realized something. The target was now a woman, and she had committed countless evil deeds. Perfectly in line with the teachings of the goddess of the hunt and the requirements of the arrow of vengeance. Unlike the last time she was beaten by Ares and then gathered divine power to retaliate, this time she was assaulting the target unilaterally. The Enchantress's vengeance was more or less unrelated, and her divine power storage function was unavailable. She was simply fulfilling the goddess's teachings and avenging the wicked woman who had lost her virginity. Thea drew the only 2 crimson feathered arrows in her quiver. This arrow was half the length of the normal arrow, requiring the bow to be fully drawn. Once locked onto the target, it had the properties of automatic tracking and guaranteed hit. Ares had been able to use most of his divine power to create a clone and deceive the arrow that day. You, an African native, don't have that ability, do you? With a bowstring fully drawn, Thea used the Eye of Horus to lock onto the Enchantress, who was about to flee the city. She pointed the bow at an angle to the sky and silently recited the goddess's prayer, the Enchantress's face appearing in her mind. It's her, she must die. As this thought emerged, the arrow of vengeance seemed to sense her intense fighting spirit. A crimson mist enveloped the otherwise ordinary shaft, and countless profound runes emerged on the tip. Thea glanced at it briefly, then stopped. This knowledge was beyond her current grasp. Like the sharp arrows and Diana's lasso of truth, it was a creation governed by laws beyond divine power, unique and unrepeatable. Die, Thea roared, releasing the bowstring with her right hand. The crimson arrow drew a graceful arc, shooting off into the distance. The air, the earth, and the rivers seemed to resonate with her word. Death, every intelligent creature, from birds and beasts to insects, received a warning. The weak prostrated themselves on the ground, while the mighty glimpsed in fear. The entire city fell into a brief silence under the force of this arrow. What the hell? As the most powerful intelligent being in the city besides Thea, the enchantress was even more sensitive to this arrow, for it was aimed squarely at her. A deadly chill and pure murderous intent mingled, hurling themselves at the enchantress. It was clearly about killing, about cold, yet surprisingly, there was no sense of evil here, only a simple, logical message: I will kill you, and you must die. The enchantress, disregarding her injuries, desperately attempted to dodge the arrow with a series of massive, long-distance teleportations. However, as she teleported, the arrow miraculously teleported as well, and the distance between them rapidly closed. The enchantress felt she had never been in such danger in centuries. This murderous intent was unbridled, seeking only the death of its target, no matter how far it fled. I won't die. I still have a way. The enchantress spewed out a hideous straw mannequin from her mouth. The mannequin was pitch black, identical in appearance to the one Thea had first met. She dug out one of her own eyes and slammed it into the mannequin, spraying mouthfuls of black blood onto it. She then opened a teleportation portal, tossed the mannequin inside, and stared nervously at the arrow. However, she was disappointed. Ares's divine power could deceive the arrow of vengeance, but her sorcery was far inferior. While her substitute doll could normally dodge certain lethal attacks, today she faced not magic, not divine power, but the power of a higher order. Only rules could counter rules. The crimson arrow knew no mercy or compassion, it was both judge and the ultimate enforcer. Snap! All intelligent creatures seemed to hear a crisp sound like a hammer shattering glass. The enchanted witch, with her body, finally expounded the teachings of the goddess of the hunt. The arrow pierced her chest, leaving no blood, no tissue, no organs, as if the wound were originally made of air. The enchanted witch clutched her wound in a daze, but her touch was empty. Her body was rapidly dissipating. Chapter 327. My body. The enchanted witch tried to continue, but her body dissipated too quickly. In the blink of an eye, most of her body seemed to have been wiped out of thin air. A whimpering sound escaped her lips, she no longer had any voice. Knowing resistance was pointless, her life instinct forced her to gather her remaining magic power to resist this rule-based annihilation. But it was all in vain. Before the inky black magic could even reach the void, the enchanted witch felt her senses of touch, hearing, and vision rapidly eroding. A searing murderous intent had already reached her head. Her soul, unwilling to accept death, desperately sent forth waves of soul waves, but all was powerless before the mighty rules. Just as she resolved to self-destruct her magic power, at least to leave behind some proof of her presence in this world, the dark magic power began to churn, ready to boil, but it was too late. The power of the rules swept through, and all magic and soul were extinguished before the rules. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no final curse uttered. The enchantress was slain by the arrow of vengeance. Whoosh! Thea felt the pain of firing the arrow. Revenge demands a price in corresponding strength. It's impossible for a child to stab Hera to death with an arrow of vengeance. Artemis wasn't that powerful. Artifacts are weapons wielded by gods, and lowering their standards means their use comes at a price. If it weren't for her recent surge in magical power, the arrow would have absorbed her life force. The instantaneous loss of 70% of her magical power was too much for even her divinely transformed body. She rested for a long time before recovering. They flew to the spot where the enchantress had died and searched the area. The arrow of vengeance was truly powerful. Not even a trace of the witch remained, a clean and utter death, without a trace of her existence. Shooting the arrow of vengeance. Due to the intense strain on her magical power, Thea lost the ability to maintain the Eye of Horus. She didn't see the enchantress release her substitute dolls. She rested for a while, recovering to 50% of her strength before rushing to the remaining two battlefields. Deathstroke and Captain Boomerang were fighting slightly closer, and by the time Thea arrived, the battle had already concluded. Deathstroke was already superior to Captain Boomerang, but Captain Boomerang was under mind control, unable to exert his full strength and was constantly outmatched. Just as Deathstroke's blade was about to slash his neck, the Enchantress died, breaking Captain Boomerang's mind control. Facing Deathstroke's fatal blow, the Australian unleashed his full potential, launching his final boomerang in his final moments. Slade was horrified, but the proximity between them was too great. Despite his superior strength, even that was futile. He could only slightly turn his head to avoid the boomerang's direct impact. The boomerang had ripped a gash over 10 centimeters across his face, from cheekbone to right to forehead. The wound was so deep that the bone was visible, and he was blind in his right eye. But Deathstroke was also a ruthless man. Despite being seriously injured, he didn't stop his longsword and cut Captain Boomerang's neck with one blow. This Australian, who had once shone with some brilliance in his original time and space, died at the hands of Deathstroke before he even became famous. When Thea arrived, she witnessed this scene. In the blink of an eye, one was dead and the other was injured. Captain Boomerang lost his life. Deathstroke didn't know about mind control. He only felt that he had been suppressing the opponent, but because of his negligence, the opponent counterattacked before his death, blinding one eye, which made him extremely angry. "I'll help you stabilize your injury first," Thea said, and a white light flashed between her fingers, and the bleeding from Slade's wound slowed significantly. "Rest first. I'll go to another battlefield." Of course Thea could heal him, just regenerate a severed limb, but the situation and timing weren't right. If the other party didn't pledge allegiance, there was no point wasting her magic. Slade remained silent, sitting atop Captain Boomerang's corpse, deep in thought. As for what he was thinking, no one knew. Harley Quinn and Katana faced Killer Croc, and the outcome was as good as Thea had expected. Both women were formidable, taking advantage of the moment Killer Croc lost his mind and was stunned by Enchantress's death, allowing them to launch a fierce attack. Arriving at the battlefield, Thea saw the katana pierce through Killer Croc's upper jaw and exit, pinning him to the ground. Then, taking advantage of his violent struggles, Harley Quinn swung a baseball bat and pounded him in the head. Only when the specially crafted bat broke did the frantic Harley Quinn cease her attack, and Killer Croc's breathing became shallow and he fell into deep coma. Just as Katana drew his sword, ready to deliver another fatal blow, Amanda finally arrived. "Stop, Katana," her direct subordinate, was incredibly obedient, sheathing his blade. Killer Croc's life was finally saved. "Have you dealt with those two enemies?" Amanda demanded as Thea slowly descended to the ground. If Thea uttered even a single no, Amanda would flee. Thankfully, Thea didn't disappoint. "They're all dealt with. The one who used fire is probably still breathing, but the Enchantress is completely reduced to ash." Amanda was delighted that the incident had been resolved perfectly, and immediately ordered her men to clean up the scene. Using the excuse of inquiring about a battle situation, she held on to Thea, a formidable fighter, and refused to let her leave. The bodies of several targets were brought out. Captain Boomerang and Rick Flag were both cold. Amanda sighed at Rick Flag. She wasn't mourning his death, she felt sorry for the time she had wasted on him. She had invested so much effort in training a qualified subordinate, and now, seeing all those years of hard work reduced to cold corpse, still made her feel sad for a second. "What is this?" A second later, her attention was drawn to the object Deadshot was wrapping into his clothes. Their main force had advanced so quickly that Deadshot had just pulled his arm out of the ice, unable to hide it, and had no choice but to hand it over. "The witch's arm just seems a little dry. I think it's lost moisture," Deadshot explained, holding what looked like a hand bone wrapped in human skin. Amanda ignored his explanation and automatically looked at Thea, the mysterious expert. Thea used her telepathic sense to detect a trace of energy still lingering on the arm, but since the Enchantress's soul had been shot, the magic power was rapidly dissipating. "This is the arm of the Enchantress. Her soul has been annihilated, so it's useless. Take it back and destroy it," Thea said casually. Amanda nodded. Her thoughts were running through her, and instructed her men to take out a box and put the arm inside. Chapter 328, Subdue the Death Bell. Thea watched the scene with a cold gaze, but didn't intervene. The Sky Eyes were accustomed to collecting mystical artifacts. They had a hidden chamber deep underground called the Black Room, housing every supernatural artifact the world could find, including the Orb of the Sun, the Spear of Destiny, and even Pandora's Box, the treasures that would later spark war. The treasures within were so plentiful they could rival the treasures of the gods. While Thea wanted to explore, the Black Room was heavily guarded. Over the past century, Mysterious individuals recruited by the government had continuously added protective spells and barriers. She didn't want to venture there without being fully prepared. Following the body, the barely breathing Chato Santana was carried out. Half his body had been blasted by lightning, leaving it charred and jarred. Amanda frowned at the sight. Was such a person even worth saving? Fortunately, the Sky Eyes were known for their lavish spending. The unconscious Chato Santana didn't hold Amanda's hand, but he was trying to secure treatment. Amanda made the decision to rescue him first, no matter what. She instructed her men to bandage him first and then transport him back to the rear for treatment. She sent money to Deathstroke and Deadshot, both mercenaries. Deathstroke was missing an eye, and Deadshot had donated the remains of his arm. Amanda compensated each of them with a portion of the originally agreed price. They left first. Thea waited for a while, seeing that there was nothing else for her to do, and left. Shortly after she left, Leela reported to Amanda on her tablet. "Captain, the city's central square is severely damaged. There are traces of a tornado. The tornado moved from the city center toward the northwest corner, eventually leaving the city and dissipating. We've recovered over 1,100 bodies from the square and along its path. Thousands are still unconscious. We haven't yet determined the number of missing persons, and there's been significant property damage." Amanda waved her hand gently, indicating she understood. There hadn't been any missile attacks on the White House or the Pentagon, and the losses suffered by the citizens were acceptable. Those with bodies would be reported to the city government for condolences, while those without would be considered missing. The federal government would send a spokesperson to make a show of it, and the flags would be flown at half-staff. Record this and tell the news media that a city gas line exploded. Wasn't there a trace of a tornado? Say that line exploded. That's the truth. Next thing, Leela wrote silently. She had grown accustomed to this kind of life. The female soldier who had fought for her country in Afghanistan had long since vanished. At a fair in Massachusetts, 10 minutes ago, many people saw a deep blue portal of light. A straw doll then fell out of it. Agents say the doll resembles Enchantress. Our people are searching the area, and witnesses claim it was seized by a gang, Leela said, flipping the image onto a tablet and handing it to Amanda. The image was blurry, clearly shot in a hurry, with a lot of camera shake, but Amanda's mind was still captivated. Isn't this person still dead? Thea said her soul was destroyed. Leela remained silent. These mysterious things were so alien to her worldview. Let's get it first, then destroy the gang. We'll handle it according to Section 5 of the Paranormal Regulation. How far have we progressed in the search for the cave where Dr. June Moon fell? We've been searching ancient texts and have found the key artifact, a green heart. But 10 minutes ago, the person in charge told me that the heart's vitality has rapidly depleted, and it's now as stiff as stone. Leela stood straight, reporting meticulously. Amanda remained non-committal. Gather them all. Send this arm, the straw doll, and the heart back to headquarters for testing. If there are no signs of life, seal them in the black room. Understood? Search for Brown's tiger with all your strength. Team X needs a new leader. Go down there and do it. I'll leave this to you. I'll go straight back to Washington. Amanda left the scene with a few guards. She had just received word that Steve Trevor was incredibly lucky, having escaped under the noses of over 30 elite criminal soldiers. Amanda had to return to the Department of Defense and discredit him in front of several powerful generals. Not to mention Amanda's calculated attempt at a showdown with Steve. Thea left the Sky Eye Society and followed certain signs to a residential building. She pushed open the door to find Slade, his right eye bandaged and bleeding. "Well, what have you decided?" "I can give you power, and your lost eye," Thea said bluntly. "You can hire me." Slade still didn't want to lose his autonomy. Loyalty was too subservient, and he disliked the idea of pledging allegiance. "Of course I can hire you," Thea said, pausing. Slade's left eye sparkled, but Thea's next words made his gaze flicker again. "Once you gain my power, you'll automatically pledge allegiance to me. This has nothing to do with your own actions, it's the working of magic. If you consider this also employment, I don't mind. It's just another way of saying it," Thea chuckled, a laugh that sounded like a demon bewitching mortals. "Power on one side, freedom on the other, which was more important?" Slade's forehead was sweating. Thea had a lot of things to do at home, and didn't want to waste time with him. With a flick of her finger, a replica yellow lantern ring fell to the table. "This ring is the source of power. I'm giving it to you now. If you don't wear it, it will return to me in 3 days. Take your time to think about it." With that, Thea vanished from the room like a puff of smoke, leaving Slade with a solemn expression. "Why are you leaving so soon? At least try to persuade me a little more." Slade stood alone at the corner of the table, staring at the gleaming yellow ring. He reached out several times, trying to grasp it, but gave up. This invisible psychological pressure was more challenging than Thea's face-to-face persuasion. At least it didn't require any ritualistic kneeling or prostration. It unconsciously tilted his mind towards power. Should he wear it or not? Slade circled the small round table, his mind spinning like a donkey turning a millstone. Images flashed through his mind, images of free flight, images of crushing his enemies to pulp. Each had its merits, and he couldn't make up his mind. He fetched a bottle of liquor from the kitchen, trying to calm himself, but the more he drank, the more depressed he became. He fell asleep in a rage. The man who used to sleep soundly amidst the roar of gunfire, lay there for 10 minutes, finding himself completely undisturbed. The searing pain from his blinded right eye made it impossible to sleep. "I'll die." Then, a strong arm reached out, grabbed the ring, and slapped it brutally onto his right middle finger. An endless stream of emotional power poured into his heart, and Slade Wilson fainted on the ground without even a groan. Chapter 329 Felicity's Trip to the Red Room. Thea, having flown not far, naturally sensed the magical transmission. Slade put on the ring and whispered a spell, activating the pre-stored limb restoration spell. With the ring's modified power, his eyes would quickly heal, and his strength, speed, and endurance would be significantly increased. The imitation ring had no materializing abilities, but its emotional power would perfectly align with his own, granting him a new ability. As to what it was, he would not know until he woke up. Shortly after returning to Star City, Thea instructed her subordinates to invest in Red Room Labs. Through capital manipulation, a large sum of funds was concealed from the board of directors, ultimately being invested in the name of a subsidiary of the group. This was done to prevent Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne's appointed directors from discovering the conspiracy. The group's daily financial transactions were enormous, and even though these two were not intelligent, they were not gods. They would never discover something they were unaware of. Thea was also a director of both groups, and both groups were using funds without her knowledge. She could not detect the other's capital flows, and similarly, the other could not detect hers. It was a ridiculous game. Investing doesn't mean immediate transfers, preliminary research is still necessary. The incident at the cutting-edge laboratory in Central City happened just a few days ago, and Thea was a bit tied up. Furthermore, even as the chairman, she couldn't personally attend a non-famous laboratory, so sending a vice president showed her seriousness. "Remember, observe more, talk less, and take note of everything that's valuable," Thea whispered. "Don't worry." The vice president she sent was Felicity Smoke. The genius hacker, excited to see the alien technology, hadn't slept all night. Although she had dark circles under her eyes, she was still full of energy. Thea was confident in her. Felicity looked unreliable, but she was actually quite astute. She had secured the top management of the Palmer Corporation the moment Ray Palmer disappeared. If it weren't for Green Arrow's mischief, she would have been chairman for a long time. The research team, led entirely by Felicity, was small, consisting of just over a dozen people, most of them legal and financial professionals. The only people who actually entered the experimental area were Felicity, Dr. Hoffman, formerly the head of product development and now the head of applied sciences, and Cisco Ramon, who had disguised himself in a Quinn Corp uniform. Fearing that Felicity wouldn't be able to handle the situation alone, Thea brought Cisco along, asking him to take a few days off in Central City as a non-staff member to help with some advice. Like Felicity, he'd been excited all night about the prospect of seeing alien technology. Normally a resident of Central City, Cisco rushed to Star City without hesitation after receiving Thea's call. Once aboard the Quinn Corp's business jet, Cisco Ramon was still brimming with excitement, looking for someone to talk to and relieve his nerves. He glanced at Dr. Hoffman, who stood beside him, looking serious, as if he were about to accomplish some revolutionary mission. Cisco shrank back, not daring to speak to him. The remaining business trust guys clearly had nothing in common with him, so he could only turn to Felicity, who was diligently applying makeup to hide her dark circles. Looking like a mere decoration. He'd initially assumed she wasn't very talented, but after a few words, Cisco was stunned. She was definitely not as good as him in mechanical engineering, but he wasn't as good as her in computer technology either. Are all the women in Star City so impressive? Cisco, a homebody who rarely spoke to women, was initially a little nervous, but he quickly realized Felicity's personality was very similar to his. She was a total nerd. Aside from her beauty and a different research focus, she was no different in any other way. Cisco had finally found a soulmate, and the two of them chatted about everything. By the time they got off the plane, they were already good friends. Welcome to Detroit, everyone. On behalf of Dr. Silas Stone, I welcome you. The person who greeted them at the airport was a 17-year-old, dark-haired girl named Sarah Charles. When asked about her specific position, she said she was an intern, which displeased several random business people. Are you mistaken? We're here to give you money, and you're sending an intern to greet us. Knowing this trip wouldn't be easy, Thea had warned Felicity in advance. Silas Stone welcomed the investment, but he was adamantly opposed to entering his lab. Unfortunately, he couldn't get the upper hand. The general's demands were unacceptable. Felicity shed her nerdy air from the plane. Her demeanor transformed, almost making Cisco Ramon think she was a different person. Having been the vice president of Quinn Enterprises for several years, Felicity's interpersonal skills were impeccable. In just a few words, she extracted a considerable amount of information from the 17-year-old intern. Dr. Silas Stone was a skilled technologist, but his emotional intelligence was lacking. After a long period of deliberation, he came up with a plan to give the Star City group the cold shoulder. She hoped they'd just walk away in a huff, but that was impossible. Her friendship with Thea aside, the alien technology was right before her eyes, and Felicity had to squeeze in to get a glimpse. Meeting Dr. Silas Stone, the lab's director, she was as dark as the bottom of a pot. But Ms. Smoke, the former super hacker and current vice president, managed to ignore his expression and gushed about the promising prospects of collaboration. Dr. Stone was utterly frustrated. Felicity, a young woman, was so naive and cute, he couldn't just kick her out. Ms. Smoke, do you think you understand my research? Is there really room for us to collaborate? Felicity glanced around, trying to find something to prove her point. Huh? She saw the system Dr. Stone was running, and her eyes lit up. Can I try this? Dr. Stone, assuming she was curious about his lab's system, silently handed her the control panel. But within 3 minutes, he was dumbfounded. Felicity's expression was extremely focused, her eyes sparkling, and her hands were typing instructions on the control panel like flying. There's a loophole here. This algorithm is wrong. It should be like this. Shit, such a big bug and you guys turned a blind eye to it. Felicity entered her professional field and instantly became a person again. The only sound in the lab was her typing. What the hell is the name of your system? A maze system. Haha, I think it's more like a whole system. Everyone in the lab stopped what they were doing because Felicity had obtained administrator privileges and kicked them all out. A group of people looked at her speechlessly. Who is this person? Chapter 330 New Goal. A group of people waited for Dr. Stone's decision. Should we kick them out or wait? Dr. Stone, though not a particularly intelligent person, was quick-witted. He figured his lab wasn't connected to the internet anyway, and this young woman looked like a computer whiz, helping him fix a bug. He remained silent, watching Felicity tinker with her work. To demonstrate her team's prowess, Felicity didn't just focus on debugging. She connected the image to the largest monitor, pointing out any issues she found, explaining what wasn't right and how to fix them. Lab interns typically had master's degrees from prestigious universities, so even those unfamiliar with computers could understand about 40% of what she explained. What a talent. Ms. Smoke, are you interested in working in our lab? Dr. Stone, a connoisseur, said with delight. Am I crazy? Why would I give up my job as a vice president and become a mere researcher? Felicity chuckled. Aren't we here today to discuss collaboration? Dr. Stone finally came to his senses. That's right, he's the vice president, supposed to lead the team. His poaching was a rather unskilled move. Real talent is admirable, but Dr. Stone fears someone who feigns knowledge and gives orders without knowing what they're talking about. His initial resistance to collaboration has subsided. Okay, I'll show you around the lab. How many of you are going? Felicity pointed to herself, Dr. Hoffman, and Cisco, indicating the three of them. Dr. Stone already had a new regard for Felicity, and since she was the team leader, it was no problem. Although they weren't familiar with Dr. Hoffman, the two knew each other. After all, there were so many PhDs in China, but only a handful were actually doing scientific research. They all knew each other more or less. This guy was okay, but Cisco Ramon. Stone couldn't stop sizing up the unremarkable Cisco. He was short, with a round face, greasy long hair, and distinct Latino features. Was this guy also a scientific researcher? He looked like one of those Mexican gangsters. Suppressing his displeasure, he led the three into the inner laboratory. While the exterior contained some of the more in-depth technological products, the interior held a true core, or rather, the things that couldn't be cracked with current technology. What is this? Some kind of stabilizer, life wavelength detector? It seems to be set at a frequency similar to humans. Is this a strongly magnetized rotating core? The rotating particles and kinetic energy are in the opposite direction, which means they hadn't walked far when Cisco couldn't contain his excitement. Everything here caught his eye. Dr. Stone's stern expression had initially made him hesitant to speak, but now he couldn't contain himself anymore, shouting excitedly with every piece of equipment he passed. Dr. Stone was astonished. This unassuming fellow was truly talented. An expert knows good from the first look. Although Cisco's claims were often incorrect, he could recognize the purpose of many things at a glance. This man's mechanical engineering skills were truly extraordinary. Cooperation now, cooperation immediately. Dr. Stone thought. After Thea sent out the expedition, he handed over the entire task to Felicity, no longer concerned with the aftermath. After a night of transformation, Deathstroke finally regained consciousness. Thea's yellow ring could monitor his movements at all times, and naturally, it also received information about his new abilities. This ability perfectly suits Deathstroke's fighting style. Slade isn't a pure martial artist, he fights for money and to complete missions. Although his swordsmanship is unmatched, he's not confined to cold weapons, frequently pulling out a pistol amidst a clash of swords. Now, thanks to the Lantern Ring's transformation, he's gained an invisible arm. His original single sword and pistol tactics can now be transformed into dual sword and pistol tactics, or a single sword and pistol, with the added bonus of a gun when the opponent isn't paying attention. Deathstroke's fighting style has become increasingly unconventional and versatile. He's also gained the ability to fly, something Slade greatly envied. While it's slow and consumes more energy, Deathstroke is still incredibly happy. Unaware that Thea can see him, he floats around the room for a long time, feeling quite alone. Does that guy in yellow really have the power to control me? If I run away, will he find me? As soon as this thought formed in his mind, the suggestion magic took effect, and a cascade of emotions, guilt, honesty, remorse, self-blame, surfaced. Even the mercenary code of trustworthiness came to mind. The power of the magic was subtly weakening his defenses, and soon he automatically saw nothing wrong in doing Thea's bidding. The thought of escaping and making it impossible for her to find him seemed to have never occurred. What do you need me for? His yellow ring could communicate with Thea, and he was determined to pledge his loyalty, but his tone remained stiff. This was due to his personality, not the suggestion. Thea had never revealed her true identity to him, and she didn't care about his attitude. As long as he got the job done, it was all that mattered. Two things, one slow and one urgent. The slow one is that you go to the metropolis and establish a mercenary organization under your name. I need elite troops, and of course, those with special abilities would be even better. I'll transfer the money to you later. Encouraged by suggestion, the stingy Slade was delighted to hear that he wouldn't have to spend any of his money, and that a large sum would even pass through his hands. He readily agreed. The other is urgent. There's a small island in the Hawaiian waters. The natives there worship Camo, the shark god. I need you to find this island and give me accurate information. Remember not to leak it. Thea's magic power had reached a bottleneck. Simply increasing it wouldn't bring about a significant change. She needed to add new attributes to increase the water storage capacity of her barrel. The 4 attributes of light, darkness, fire, and wind were insufficient. She needed to add water and earth to her magic power structure. Absorbing the attributes of gods to transform one's physique is the most convenient and quickest method. The amulet of Isis only provides pure, attributeless magic. Horus's main element was wind, and Ares's was fire, which didn't significantly alter the nature of their magic. There are indeed many water-attributed gods, but the strongest are plentiful, and Thea is unable to defeat any of them. After repeatedly checking her memory, she finally sought out Camo, who was still bullying the natives of Hawaii. Camo, the shark god, is the father of the Shark King and an old god, likely worshipped only by a few villages on the islands. He is arguably the weakest deity of the Age of Gods. Crucially, he's still alive and well on Earth, enjoying himself preying on young boys and girls. Using the Eye of Horus would certainly be quicker, but considering the opponent is also a god, using the divine eye would easily expose him. It's better to err on the side of caution and let Deathstroke investigate. In the original time and space, Amanda had taken down him after more than a dozen agents had died. Thea had no idea what this deity was capable of. She pondered over it, thinking that her combat power was definitely stronger than those dozen agents. With her men, taking him down wouldn't be a problem. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331 Artificial Intelligence finally begins. Indigenous Spirits? Slade received this information from his ring. Yesterday, he wouldn't have believed in these bizarre things, but now he believed them completely. He could fly, so a few more hairy spirits were nothing. For a fee, he'd dare to stab them. The mission wasn't difficult, and he accepted it immediately. After ending Slade's call, Thea returned to the management company to monitor Grodd's daily life. Grodd, the young gorilla, had already shown signs of special abilities after undergoing several brutal military experiments. Caitlin Snow had recently been in a passionate relationship with Ronnie Raymond. Their relationship, from holding hands to living together, had lasted less than a month. Despite being distracted by their relationship, as the animal's direct caregiver, she noticed something unusual and reported it. The Reverse Flash, disguised as Dr. Harrison Wells, had been observing Grodd for 3 consecutive days. Thea knew her chance was about to arrive. The person in charge of the Guerrilla Project was General Wade Allen. Although he was a general in name only, he was only a brigadier general. No one in the Department of Defense had spoken to him, and he had no idea of Thea's true capabilities. Initially curious about the billionaire's business, he later investigated and found nothing amiss, so he let the matter rest. He was currently engaged in a heated argument with the Reverse Flash. Harrison, we have an agreement. Do you think you're going to disobey the Department of Defense? Remember, your research funding is in our hands. General Wade Allen perfectly embodied the archetypal villain, his face shrouded in gloom, rigidity, and apathy. The Reverse Flash, a time traveler, had, after 15 years of training, reached the pinnacle of his acting prowess. His acting was fully on display, his refined features distorted by anger, yet he didn't come across as sinister. Instead, his awe-inspiring righteousness captivated him. Shut up. I will never allow you to conduct such cruel animal experiments again. Wade Allen, you are blaspheming science and trampling on humanity. Reverse Flash's hair stood on end, slamming the table and roaring. Uninformed outsiders would have thought he'd been unaware of the experiment. Wade Allen had no idea of his cunning. He hadn't noticed Grodd's unique situation. It was only his men's reports of fluctuations in the experimental data that had led to this trip to the cutting-edge laboratory. Seeing Reverse Flash's reluctance to cooperate, he didn't bother to argue. With a wave of his hand, he ordered the soldiers to take all the experimental subjects away for further study. How dare you? Reverse Flash reached out to pull the soldiers back, fully acting out the role of the powerless intellectual against the brutal soldiers. The soldiers didn't dare to use force, each holding an arm to prevent him from moving. Let me go. You inhuman bastards, if his speed was still there, 2,000, not even 2, wouldn't be able to stop him. But now, even if you had it, he couldn't show it in public. Sensing the attention of many in the lab, he acted even harder, shouting until his voice was hoarse. That old guy's acting is amazing, Thea exclaimed. With nothing else to do, she naturally joined the crowd to watch the fun. The old man portrayed the conscientious scholar so flawlessly that he probably even believed it himself. General Wade Allen led his troops to the side of the laboratory and ordered them to go in and capture all the experimental animals. The soldiers were quick to act, marching in as a group, but soon they heard a burst of gunfire from inside. What's going on? General Wade Allen immediately found a cover and hid, sending his adjutant to investigate. The adjutant's arrival didn't change the chaotic situation. As the researchers outside were discussing what was happening, a loud explosion was heard. A grenade had blasted a large hole in the northwest corner of the enclosure, sending soldiers and apes scurrying out in a flurry. What had happened? Wade Allen was bewildered, while Thea was the only one chuckling. Reverse Flash was a genius. He'd used hypnosis to implant a message resembling a friend and father in Grodd's subconscious. To avoid alerting him, Thea hadn't erased it. It was he who had secretly signaled Grodd, mind-controlling the soldiers to create chaos. Chaos, the more chaotic, the better. Thea had summoned her avatar early on to provide proof of presence. It was now chatting with Caitlin, Ronnie, and a group of others. Her original body, cloaked in invisibility, meandered its way to a lab corridor. Unleashing her mental power to scan carefully, she quickly spotted the clue. Here it is. She placed Reverse Flash's fingerprints on the 5 fingers of her right hand and swiped them against a blank spot on the wall. The secret door instantly swung open. "Miss Thea Quinn, you do not have permission to enter this place." A pale blue avatar appeared in the room. It was none other than the artificial intelligence Gideon. It resembled the one Thea had seen aboard the Waverider that day, except for its rigid, mechanical tone. The authority it referred to was, of course, the laboratory's access rights at this time and place. Thea smiled and said, "Gideon, it's been a long time since we last met. You've made a mistake. I do have permission." Then, reciting a long password, the original login password she had obtained from the Time Lords Council that day. Gideon seemed to have frozen, and Thea stared at it nervously. After 3 minutes, an even more mechanical voice rang out. "Please complete the permission record. This requires fingerprints, pupils, blood, and DNA data for the authorized user." Racing against time, Thea quickly entered her information one by one, completing over a dozen entries before completing the process. The mechanical voice faded, and the slightly more agile Gideon returned. "Is there anything I can help you with? I need to see your permissions list." Thea had originally intended to take the source code and leave, but the mechanical voice had made her realize that perhaps the Reverse Flash's permissions weren't high. This suspicion was illogical, but she kept thinking it. "Sure," the AI replied readily, presenting a long list before Thea. As expected, Thea saw her own name on the first permission list. Reverse Flash's real name, Albert Swan, was listed 12th, but then Thea frowned as she saw Barry Allen's name, 4th. "Gideon, who developed you?" Thea had been curious about this question for a long time. It was designed by Barry Allen. It took generations of hard work from the Allen and Swan families to finally succeed. Gideon spoke emotionlessly, as if the matter he was discussing had nothing to do with him. Chapter 332, Gerudo's Whereabouts. The design of the Flash, developed over generations by 2 families, had ultimately fallen into the hands of the Time Lords Council. Thea was baffled, but perhaps future Gideon would know, a question this lower-level version of the present wouldn't. The Council's login passwords were even more powerful than those of the original designers. Could their technological capabilities be that advanced? Thea wasn't sure, but she collected her thoughts and returned to the present. Since her own authority was so high, there was no need to reinvent the wheel. "Gideon, can you connect to the internet?" "Yes, but Dr. Swan's orders are to stay off the internet and focus solely on news about the Flash." On April 25, 2024, Thea couldn't care less about the Flash. Those guys were the source of chaos. A world without the Flash would be better. Unfortunately, she wasn't strong enough to do that. Otherwise, she'd wipe them all out. Next time he asks, just give him a fake image and tell him nothing has changed. "Connect to my Quinn Corp supercomputer." Commands accepted. Logged into the Quinn Corp supercomputer, Gideon's voice came from Thea's tablet, his tone showing a hint of flexibility. He might be a machine, but being trapped in this tiny little space in Reverse Flash was already frustrating. Reverse Flash's hard-earned alms went into the lab, and he didn't dare reveal his existence, so he usually ran on low power and low configuration. Now, in the supercomputer Thea had invested the entire company into, without power constraints or configuration worries, it was like a fish in water. There were countless examples of AI rebellion, and Thea had to be on guard. She kept issuing commands through her tablet, issuing over a dozen orders, layered on top of each other. She believed that with her authority, as long as she was alive, Gideon wouldn't be able to betray him. Of course, if she died, then he could do whatever he wanted. Less than 10 minutes later, Thea slipped out of the dark room. Taking advantage of everyone's concentrated attention, she swapped positions with her original form and immediately dismantled the clones. Chaos descended upon the scene, with several smaller apes running in all directions. General Wade Allen didn't know which one to capture, but to assert his authority, He kept ordering the few soldiers still under his control, arresting this and that, driving the larger ones in circles. Nearby, the Reverse Flash shouted, denouncing the military's inhumanity. Thea secretly despised him. The Reverse Flash, now devoid of any speed force, wasn't afraid. In her eyes, the Reverse Flash was no more powerful than the old warehouse keeper at Quinn's organization. But he had created the Flash, and the Flash could lead a host of speedsters. Thea feared a swarm of speedsters from future timelines would emerge and gang up on her. She was too cautious to confront the Reverse Flash. She didn't dare to attack, but she could still disgust him. Just then, Thea spotted someone watching the scene and silently gave Grodd a command. 4 or 5 tall, muscular apes, uttering whoops, leaped out from all directions, grabbing at a plump black woman in the crowd. This woman was the one who'd been jealous of Thea and Caitlin's looks and had been trying to bully them when they'd first arrived. Deceiving superiors and subordinates, using the power of others to bully others was her daily routine. Of course, these work practices wouldn't help her this time. Several apes were brimming with excitement, some touching her face, others holding hands, and two even carrying the plump black woman and attempting to run away. Whoa! Everyone let out a series of unexplained noises. They'd originally been there to watch the fun, but now these apes were attempting to capture someone. The plump black woman was usually unpopular, but they couldn't stand by and watch her get taken away by the apes. The doctors and masters had little fighting power, so they could only offer verbal support by shouting. The experienced Reverse Flash was stunned. Reason told him to rescue the plump black woman, but his old age was no match for the gorillas. What was he supposed to do now? Capture those gorillas? General Wade Allen wondered, wondering if they were the abnormal gorillas his men had reported. No matter what, they had to capture them first. A few soldiers grew weary. The small gorillas were fine, but these were so large and so excited that capturing them alive with their bare hands was a real challenge. But their frustration didn't last long. A continuous barrage of gunfire rang out, bang, bang, bang. Thea, armed with a Beretta 92F, shot each of the 5 gorillas dead. Why keep these dangerous gorillas around? I'll pay for all the damage. Thea feigned righteousness, making it impossible to tell the gorillas were acting with her indirect instructions. Seeing her ruthlessly kill the chimps, the terrified researchers suddenly felt reassured and gathered around Thea, with several women even offering their support. They should be shot immediately. These military experiments are so harmful. Caitlin Snow raged in righteous indignation. Well done, Miss Quinn, said Ronnie Raymond, who knew her identity and knew she had plenty of money. The remaining unaware onlookers cheered, and even Reverse Flash offered their support. Our lab will pay for these chimps. Miss Quinn, this is dangerous here, you should all go back. Reverse Flash ostensibly took the blame to protect her, but he was actually worried she'd kill them all, leading to Grodd's unleashing, which would be disastrous. Thea, in full force of her acting choreography, angrily dragged Caitlin Snow back to the rest area. While ostensibly dealing with everyone with nonsense like "you're such a good shot and you're so decisive," he mentally erased the Reverse Flash's remaining hypnotic thoughts and instructed Grodd to flee alone, down the sewers and out of Central City. Reverse Flash, however, lacked telepathy. After dealing with General Wade Allen, who constantly threatened to show him the ropes, he quickly reassured everyone in the lab, reassuring them that research wouldn't be interrupted and that the light of humanity would forever illuminate Central City. Finally, he visited the severely traumatized, plump, dark-skinned woman, fighting back his nausea to shake her hand and express his hope that she would return to work soon. After a long day of rambling, he finally found time to reach the location he had agreed to meet with Grodd. Where did you go? The 25th century time traveler, self-proclaimed intelligent and a master of toy-making, circled the dilapidated factory 3 times but couldn't spot a single gorilla hair, let alone a single one. Did they get separated? Or were they captured by the military? Or did my hypnosis wear off? Reverse Flash's heart sank. He instantly thought of several possibilities, each one plausible. He hurried back to the lab and first went to the darkroom to see if there were any changes in the future. He had never imagined that at this point in time, someone could have higher authority than him. Gideon faithfully carried out Thea's orders, saying, "Nothing happened today, everything is normal." Chapter 333 New Products. 25th Century History Books. Losing his foresight, Reverse Flash was baffled. He spent the next few days monitoring the surrounding cities, but there was no news of any ape trouble. Where had Grodd gone? This question lingered in Reverse Flash's mind for years. Where had Grodd gone? Thea had simply dragged him off to another planet. At that point, Grodd wasn't as enormous as he would become, but his mind control abilities were already evident. However, after being subjected to military experiments for so long, his anger was strong. Thea wasn't a high-ranking monk, so she couldn't help him resolve it. Her solution was to let him vent his anger. They found a planet with a low level of civilization. The inhabitants seemed to have evolved from insects, wielding stone weapons. Now 2 meters tall and possessing mind control, Grodd easily wiped out an entire settlement. "That's fun," Grodd telepathically said. "Keep playing if it's fun. I'll pick you up in a few days." Thea also had telepathic abilities, but she wasn't as natural with them. Leaving Grodd behind to wreak havoc on the aliens, Thea returned to Star City for an interview with the Daily Planet. Dressed in a black jacket, flared black wide-leg pants, pointed toe heels, and plain glasses, she exuded a serene and dignified demeanor, hardly suggesting that just 10 minutes earlier she had unleashed a sinister gorilla with supernatural powers to slaughter the alien hominids. "Hello, Miss Quinn, I'm Lois Lane, and this is my assistant, Jimmy Olsen. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us." Lois Lane, dressed in a white shirt, beige jacket, and black hair, was a professional. She wasn't offended by Thea's earlier decision to decline the interview by bringing up her father. After introducing herself, she introduced Jimmy Olsen, the young photographer beside her. Thea nodded, acknowledging the fact that Clark Kent was still searching for his own fulfillment. It would be some time before he, with his old-fashioned eyes, took up work at the Daily Planet. The meeting was pleasant enough, but after just a few words, Thea knew they wouldn't be friends. Their personalities were so different. Laurel Lance and Barbara Gordon might be able to connect, but Thea wouldn't. The interview was frustrating. Lois Lane's questions were incredibly provocative. She immediately launched into the dark history of the Quinn Corporation, with its wage arrears, substandard goods, and disregard for state and municipal laws. There was a ton of questions, and those who knew it thought it was an interview, while those who didn't would have thought it was a struggle session. "This idiot is looking for trouble." If this idiot weren't for her father being a general in the Department of Defense and her future boyfriend being Superman, her grave would be overgrown. But the photographers were still filming. Throwing a fireball or sending Deathstroke down to kill her wouldn't be appropriate. Thea could only patiently deal with the questions. It was just buck passing. The workers were all temporary, and the substandard goods were the ones being sold by subcontractors. As for state laws, we are a global corporation, and we only respect the federal constitution. Thea complained bitterly, trying to evade the issue. "Ms. Quinn, the outside world is generally puzzled by the merger of the Quinn Group and the Merlyn Group. As far as I know, your two companies don't have much business dealings. And there isn't much overlap in operations. What led to the merger?" Lois Lane was dissatisfied with many of her answers and finally posed a weighty question. What could Thea say? She couldn't mention the fact that it was a gift from her father, nor could she mention the fact that those behind the scenes who controlled the country's lifeline wanted her to deal with the Luthor Group. Fortunately, she had prepared for this question. She started with a traditional friendship between the two families and continued on to how to deal with new changes in the new era. She spoke in such a vague way that it was as if she had said nothing. However, she didn't go on about trivial matters. At the last moment of the interview, Thea threw out a piece of news. "We will soon integrate the technological achievements of the two existing groups and launch a product that will benefit every household and every citizen. Can you tell me in advance what it's about?" "All I can say is that everything is still in the laboratory stage, but it will be released soon. It's a medical product." Lois Lane paused as she took notes. "Are you kidding me? Isn't Quinn an energy company, and Merlyn a shipping giant? How could the merger of two such unrelated companies create a medical breakthrough?" Facing Lois Lane's slightly suspicious look, Thea chose to ignore it. She felt helpless. Quinn Group's urban construction would play a significant role in the future war, so it could be retained. The development of new energy sources required extensive experimentation and was still in small-scale applications. Merlyn's shipping business was definitely a sunset industry, reaching a critical stage where it needed immediate transformation. Malcolm's reckless letting go was also due to the fact that it was too much of a hassle. Other group leaders, looking for new economic growth sources, could only travel the globe, trying to find a new product to reverse their decline. Thea's advantage over them lies in her vastly expanded universe. She can roam the cosmos. If she sees something good, She can just grab it and borrow it. Those aliens won't sue her in the US Supreme Court. She stumbled upon a versatile body repair device on an intelligent planet and brought it back to Earth, along with a product and instructions. The light ring can translate the instructions, and Gideon can analyze the device's principles. Preliminary prototypes have already been fabricated. Life on that planet is fragile, and their bodies constantly need repairs. They scan them to a standard state. If they're injured or sick, they can perform a simple computer recovery, like a one-click recovery. Excessive parts can be cut off, and missing parts can be replaced. While Earthlings certainly can't do that, their repair technology is truly impressive, saving significant time in surgery. A 2-meter-long capsule allows the patient to lie inside and be scanned, while an external operator operates the surgery, debridement, and sutures, resulting in a highly efficient operation. This is ideal for Americans, who face daily visits from alien villains, bombs and poison gas, and a dance of flames and black fog, all in dire straits. After seeing off Louise Lane, who had garnered significant news, Thea arrived at the group's applied science laboratory. The two groups had merged, and with them, hundreds of researchers. After several months of initial integration, this group, primarily focused on research, had become the first to integrate. Dr. Hoffman was still in the Red Room. Thea called over the deputy director. "Are there any issues with the medical bay's operation?" The deputy director, a student of the veteran Hoffman's, had inherited his meticulous and rigorous style. "Everything is going smoothly. The recruited clinical trial subjects are in good health and ready to begin the first operation in the medical bay." Chapter 334 The past is like smoke. This is truly a groundbreaking invention. The deputy minister led Thea inside, his stern face tinged with excitement. It was no wonder he was excited. To get them to create this epic-making product, Thea had put in a tremendous amount of effort. Gideon reverse-engineered the finished product, recreating it into a very basic version. Thea then instructed them to research it, then constantly used suggestion to enlighten them, making them believe it was the fruit of collective wisdom. This was, of course, part of the Red Room's research. Adapting products from different civilizations to suit their own planets involved a vast array of disciplines. This was why Thea, despite having access to alien technology, insisted on investing in the Red Room. Technology is easy to find, but talent is hard to come by. While the country can bring together cutting-edge talent from various fields, she doesn't have the prestige to do so personally. This product is priced at $1 million apiece. Isn't it too expensive? Many ordinary people can't afford it, the deputy minister asked, as if remembering something. It's not expensive. For the rich, it's the price of a car. How can something that can save lives be expensive? As for civilians, we can manufacture simple versions and give them away or sell them to major hospitals and settlements. In the future, they can even be erected in city streets like ATMs, providing treatment for a small fee, Thea explained casually. She didn't really care about the cost. The software in each machine would scan the patient's basic information, which would eventually be fed into the artificial intelligence. Combined with the facial recognition software Felicity had previously developed, Thea would have access to information on most people in the country, and even the world. This was priceless. The Sky Eye Society had agents stationed around the globe, providing instant notification of any disturbance. Luthor, on the other hand, had launched hundreds of satellites into orbit around the Earth. Bruce Wayne had fewer satellites, but his watchtower space bases were equivalent to 100 satellites each. Thea was already far behind them in intelligence. If she couldn't compete in the sky, she would compete on the ground. Here's the list of personnel participating in this experiment. The deputy minister handed her a document. Thea casually took it and flipped through it. Huh? She stared at the photo included with the document. It showed a young man, in some ways, even handsome. She glanced at the registered name, Roy Harper. Is there something fishy about this guy? The deputy director asked nervously, noticing her momentary change in expression. Thea flipped through the document again. The applicant had applied for free treatment because his mother had a large tumor in her abdomen. The agreement stated that it was experimental and carried certain risks, but it also guaranteed that all subsequent treatment costs would be covered. That's him, right? Schedule surgery for his mother as soon as possible. Without further ado, Thea closed the document and handed it back to him. Only after the deputy director left did Thea let out a thoughtful sigh. Roy Harper was a key member of Team Arrow, codenamed Arsenal, and had participated in many operations with the Justice League and the Teen Titans. That was fine, but the crucial thing was that in the original time and space, he was Thea's lover. It was because of him that Thea later adopted the codename Red Arrow. Thea gazed at the sky alone. Perhaps beyond this atmosphere, beyond the universe, there truly were supreme beings who set the rules, but so what? Thea's will was ironclad, nothing would waver. Her thoughts were simple and direct, summed up in the words Yao Fei had taught Oliver that day on Purgatory Island: survive, survive. For the past few years, she had diligently studied and practiced, constantly moving forward, fearing being abandoned by this world, afraid that her fate would be determined by those cloaked figures in the sky. Shit, Thea cursed softly. Just then, the deputy minister informed her that everything was ready. Begin. The two stood at a high point, and Thea nodded gently, signaling the start. Two nurses supported an elderly woman into the medical bay. Roy Harper, wearing a red sweater, waited nervously outside. Thea had no intention of going up to meet them. She didn't care about the patient's safety. Her magic could avert any serious medical incident. She simply wanted to see how effective this medical bay, which had been rebuilt to its original form, could be. Staff outside the medical cabin quickly completed a body scan. Since the elderly woman hadn't entered her health records, they could only operate on site. From outside, the staff determined the surgical plan based on the scans and then entered it into a computer. The medical cabin's doors closed, and the elderly woman was anesthetized. Several robotic arms began their work, performing a laparotomy, resection, hemostasis, and suturing. The procedure, which would normally cost tens of thousands of dollars and take even a skilled surgeon several hours, was completed in less than 10 minutes, with the patient's vital signs remaining intact. So fast, Roy Harper, still pacing like a donkey pulling a millstone outside, was stunned by the speed. The staff showed him the removed tumor and the patient's various body measurements. Roy Harper couldn't quite believe it. If the data were true, his mother could go home that afternoon. He feared these large corporations were using poor people for human experiments. If he hadn't been so poor, he wouldn't have applied to volunteer. Despite the medical staff's persuasion, he was determined to stay and wait for his mother to wake up. Miss Quinn, it looks like this experiment was a success. The deputy minister was excited. Although this was the result of collective wisdom, as a supervisor, he would also be able to go down in history. The experiment will continue. Tomorrow I will arrange for someone to submit an application to the federal government, and it will be available for sale in a month. If it was only being launched in Star City, all they had to do was tell more and go through the formalities. This was the terrifying aspect of their mother-daughter collusion. But now, for a nationwide launch, federal approval would be required. 3 days later. Miss Quinn, these two say they are FBI agents and want to see you. The assistant nervously led the two into Thea's office. The two agents were a man and a woman. The man was a very sturdy, middle-aged African-American, and the woman was a young white woman, almost the same age as Thea. The two of them took out their IDs and waved them. We're from the FBI. My name is. Thea glanced at them, stood up from her chair, and reached out to press a few times on the empty space on the table. A projection appeared in the room. Number 332,589, let me check. As she entered the ID number, the projection immediately showed the other party's information, but the owner of the number was white. Thea pointed at the projection and said to the middle-aged black man, "This person must be a real FBI agent. Who are you?" "Or who are you?" The middle-aged black man and the young woman looked at each other in silence. Thea could see that their identities were fake, which was why they had so blatantly hacked into the FBI. Now that their disguise was exposed, the middle-aged man could only helplessly take out another ID. "I'm from the Deo Paranormal Investigation Bureau. I'm Director Hank Henshaw. Chapter 335 Humanoid Gift Pack. This person beside me is Agent Alex Danvers." The middle-aged black man named Hank Henshaw introduced a female agent beside him. The female agent, still visibly dazed from having her identity revealed, frantically produced her ID at the middle-aged man's beckoning. "Hank Henshaw," Thea muttered. Was this the real guy, or was he the Martian Manhunter impersonating her? He habitually removed his glasses and glanced at her. The man immediately sensed something, a faint crimson glow in his eyes, but he suppressed it. "It seems your identity is also fake, am I right, Chief Henshaw?" Thea's teasing voice echoed in his mind. Martian Manhunter, who often practiced telepathy, was being sensed for the first time today. Glancing sideways, he noticed that Alex Danvers wasn't paying attention to him, and he, too, sent a message into Thea's mind. Who are you? After questioning her, he didn't expect a direct answer. His crimson eyes fixed on her, his habit of finding answers on his own. Martian Manhunter is the world's most powerful telepath, a gift he possesses. Thea's proficiency in this area is far inferior, and she can only use her mental power to create layers of barriers to ward off his mental intrusions. However, the intrusion failed to materialize, and the man, arrogant enough to attempt a visual inspection, sneered Thea, casting a casual illusion to prevent Alex Danvers from seeing anything. Then, looking up, a pale yellow beam of light from her eyes met the Martian Manhunter's gaze. Their gazes met in midair, and with a snapping sound, they both turned and stepped back. Thea was only slightly shaken back, but it wasn't a serious problem. Martian Manhunter, however, was in dire straits. His powers rivaled those of Superman, their range and complexity so vast that they couldn't even fill two 400-line essays. But he had a fatal weakness: he feared fire. That's right, Martian Manhunter feared fire. The immense grief of his people being reduced to ash by the flames had created a rift within him, a rift that had already spread from the inner to the physical. Now, meeting Thea's gaze, the source of fear instantly shrank from him. Telepathy and X-rays vanished, lost in his memories. Thea seized the opportunity to delve into his mind, studying and observing his telepathic abilities. Thought scanning, mind erasure, mental shielding, mind control, remote mind reading, illusion, hypnosis, possession, mind sensing, mind connection, telekinesis, a whole host of other psychic abilities. Faced with this bounty of gifts, Thea unceremoniously memorized them all, intending to study them later. What a jack of all trades. Thea couldn't help but sigh. These were just his psychic abilities, a fraction of his superpowers. Add to that super strength, super endurance, regeneration, flight, and super senses. If this guy weren't afraid of fire, no one would be his match. Thoughts lasted only a split second, manifesting externally as a fraction of a second. Seeing this humanoid gift, Thea was already impressed and casually added a fear resistance bonus to him. The Martian Manhunter, sweating profusely, finally emerged from the horrifying, flame-filled illusion. Who are you? His consciousness had returned, but the mental burden wouldn't dissipate so quickly. His once astonishing strength was now only a fraction of what it once was. Seeing Alex Danvers in a trance, he hesitantly asked. I'm from Earth, a true Earthling. But you're a Martian. Aren't you? Thea crossed her legs, her long legs dazzling beneath her one-piece skirt. But the Martian Manhunter had no time to admire them, as Thea spoke Martian, a language he hadn't heard in centuries. I'm a Martian. My name is Ron Johns. How did you learn my language? Thea raised the ring in her hand. You should know the Green Lantern Corps, right? I'm a member of the Yellow Lantern Corps. Oh. The Martian Manhunter breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't know the Yellow Lanterns, but he had seen the Green Lantern Corps and knew their translators could translate all the languages in the universe. You know me? You know my weakness. Martian Manhunter initially thought the flaming scene was a product of his own inner thoughts, but his immense understanding of telekinesis saw a human element at play. The only conclusion was that the other party knew him, or at least knew his weakness. Thea smiled, but Martian Manhunter pressed, Did my Kryptonian friend tell you? Yes. Our Kryptonian friend Clark told you, Thea said, as she was about to offer a reply. He then mentally conjured up an answer, which sealed the matter. Superman and Martian Manhunter were close friends in their early days. Sharing similar abilities, both aliens stranded on Earth after their planets were destroyed, they had much to talk about. However, their ideologies soon parted ways. Fearing Superman's evil, Martian Manhunter enthusiastically promoted kryptonite to everyone he met. As a good friend, Superman naturally reciprocated, telling everyone that Martian Manhunter had the same abilities as him, but was afraid of fire. The result of the two friends' sabotage was that Batman had a thick notebook filled with their respective abilities and weaknesses. Hearing Clark's name from Thea, he was even more certain that his good friend was peddling his weaknesses again. He was incredibly upset. So, what do you want to talk to me about? My intelligence should be known to the Sky Eye, and so should several high-ranking officials in the Department of Defense. What exactly are you doing here? Thea saw him deep in thought and interrupted him. If you don't need anything, leave now. Thea's busy. Sky Eye? Are you from there? We're a government agency. Martian Manhunter felt he hadn't clarified things beforehand and made a mistake. Even if there were any conflicts between the government and the military, They were on the same side. In other words, Thea and he were on the same side. A government agency? No wonder. Thea nodded. We're not enemies. You can verify my identity with General Ryan. However, they're vying for the position of Secretary of Defense, so you'll need to make an appointment in advance. With the old minister retiring, the powerful figures in the Department of Defense were now entering the final sprint. The winner would speak to the president, make the so-called nomination, and the deal would be sealed. Thea couldn't find anyone at the Department of Defense when she needed help, which showed how much they'd been scrambling for connections lately. Martian Manhunter nodded. He understood the situation. The inability to find the person responsible had a lot to do with today's blunder. He smoothed over his words. Your medical cabin uses alien technology, right? Don't you understand the risks? Thea sneered. What a joke. The US has been leading the world in technology for the past 50 years. Don't tell me they developed all this on their own? Did they reverse engineer alien technology? Chapter 336, Mind Shield. Martian Manhunter was speechless and stunned. Earth is in chaos right now. Instead of using alien technology for war, it's better to use it for people's well-being. That's all I have to say. If nothing else, please return. Thea explained everything in a few words and tried to send Martian Manhunter away. Perhaps because of the tragic deaths of his family, especially his daughter, he had a passive attribute he wasn't even aware of. Every cute little girl was his daughter. With overflowing paternal love, he considered every sweet and lovely girl his daughter, from Gypsy to Stargirl, to Supergirl Kara Danvers, and now Alex Danvers. Thea didn't want to fall into his clutches. He was powerful and nosy, so staying away from him was the best option. Her expression was aloof, and Martian Manhunter could see it. He easily unraveled Alex's illusion. Supergirl's sister was unaware of what had just happened, her memory still stuck on impersonating the FBI. Now that everything is clear, we'll be leaving. Goodbye, both of you. Quinn Enterprises welcomes guidance from government agencies at any time, Martian Manhunter said, pulling Alex out. Director, didn't you say there was a problem with her new product? Alex, barely 19, who barely resembled a future Deo agent, asked in confusion. Martian Manhunter had countless things on his mind, but he didn't know where to begin. His mental state hadn't recovered, so he feigned composure. Maybe the information's wrong. Go back and re-examine it. He desperately needed a break. He sent Alex off to check the files while Martian Manhunter considered the information he'd gained today. After sending the two obstructions away, Thea put aside all work and devoted herself to studying the various mind control secrets she'd stolen from Martian Manhunter's mind. His abilities were more of a natural gift, innate. It wasn't impossible for Thea to reach his level through study, but it would require an immense amount of time. The first thing Thea researched was the telepathic shield. Martian Manhunter used his powerful mental power to envelop his consciousness, shielding it from prying eyes. Thea's psychic power wasn't that strong, and it was impossible for her to maintain it constantly in her daily life. She borrowed from Martian Manhunter's method, employing an emotional version of a psychic shield. A flood of fear enveloped her consciousness. Anyone attempting to peer into her thoughts had to overcome this fear first. Even if they could overcome this barrier, their combat effectiveness would instantly drop by 30%. Such powerful psychic power. After a day of research, Thea marveled at the Martian Manhunter's racial innate talent. It was a waste of talent for such a formidable force to be limited to healing, cleaning, and counseling in the Justice League. Grabbing her bag, she left the group, arriving in Gotham as night fell. Thea first met secretly with Lucius Fox, president of the Wayne Group. The Quinn Group's aggressive expansion into the medical industry was bound to impact Wayne Group, a leader in genetic engineering for healthcare. Provoking the Luthor Group while simultaneously encroaching upon Wayne Group's traditional business areas, this was Thea's strategy. While seemingly reckless, it was precisely the outcome the higher-ups desired. An alliance between any two of the three major multinational corporations would not allow. The upstart Quinn Group was able to challenge two established companies simultaneously, a feat the top brass welcomed. To a certain extent, they might even lend Thea a hand. As for who was exploiting whom, that was a matter of opinion. Thea's visit was a signal. Business was business, not personal relationships. The old black man, with nearly half his life in the business world, had seen it all and was well aware of her intentions. However, the business world was a battlefield, so he didn't fully trust Thea's words and brushed things off with a chuckle. Despite their previous friendship, the meeting wasn't warm, But it wasn't dull either. Having achieved some initial results, Thea rushed back to the Wayne mansion, where she agreed to review Damien's academic progress. Batman and Damien were away, so she was greeted by the old butler, Alfred. Experienced with the elderly, Thea offered him a few words of goodwill and several pounds of Assam tea. The old man, a traditional Englishman, had been a tea drinker for years, but tea drinking was rare in the US, coffee was the norm, and the old man was already tired of it. The old man sniffed the tea leaves. Is this the latest tea? Yes, just picked recently. Thea wouldn't say she and Diana had just passed by someone else's tea plantation and picked it out of curiosity. That's thoughtful, that's thoughtful. The old man had always had a good impression of Thea. She was well educated, cultured, and, crucially, polite. Thea was one of the few guests allowed through the main door. Batman's companions usually never used doors, but often roamed around windows, rooftops, and sewers. I chatted with the old man, listening to his stories from his time in the British Special Forces. Soon, Bruce returned with Damien. Both father and son felt a little embarrassed to face Thea again. Batman hadn't known his son's foundation was so poor. He hadn't been anywhere for a whole month, and rumors were circulating in Gotham that Batman was dead. He had been working tirelessly to improve Damien's literacy. With his high IQ and vast knowledge, he compiled a set of teaching materials that condensed 6 years of elementary school knowledge into a single month, forcing Damien to learn. If you don't understand, you'll be beaten. If you can't memorize it, you won't eat. Damien also possessed a tenacious character. After the blood baptism, his intelligence and memory reached a peak. Through diligent effort, he managed to learn what others would take 6 years to learn in just 1 month. Check it out. Batman's face was stern, but he felt quite happy. He felt like a poor student returning to school under the brunt of his parents' discipline. Thea didn't need Damien to have a high level of knowledge. A rigid worldview would only hinder his magical studies. But he had to be literate. How could he become a mage without knowing how to read? She didn't hold back, casually asking a few questions about math, English, and Latin, and Damien answered them fluently. Not bad, not bad. Thea was pleased, rubbing Damien's head. The child suppressed a murmur. Instructing Damien to meet her in Star City tomorrow, she bid farewell to the father and son. Walking alone through the streets of Gotham, Thea opened the Eye of Horus. She had one last task, to find Tommy and give him the syringe of divine blood. This guy was getting along better and better with Barbara and Laurel, and he hadn't been back to Star City in a long time. While searching for him, Thea wondered what to say when they met. After all, Malcolm hadn't mentioned their blood relationship, and sending him something for no reason was a bit strange. Chapter 337 Pamela Ashley. During her search, Thea stumbled upon a woman. The Eye of Horus's far-sightedness allowed her to see countless people and events. Initially, Thea paid no attention, but as her gaze swept over the woman, she instantly noticed something different about her. Since Tommy's situation wasn't pressing, Thea's curiosity piqued, and she flew over to the woman 2 blocks away and took a closer look. The woman looked 2 or 3 years older than Thea, with red hair, a green t-shirt, and white canvas shoes. Her attire suggested she came from a less privileged background. "Hey, can you hear me?" Thea called out to the red-haired woman, only to find she was in a state of distress. Her steps were unsteady, and at first glance, she looked intoxicated. However, Thea's clairvoyance revealed that her genetic makeup was rapidly degrading. Another victim of some human experiment? Having just seen off Roy Harper a few days ago, Thea couldn't help but wonder. The only difference was that she was certain, and Roy was the beneficiary, while the woman in front of her had clearly encountered an uncertain outcome, becoming the victim. The other person's body was teeming with vitality, but the intensity of this energy far exceeded the limits of his genes. Could he heal this wound himself? If it had been a simple gunshot or knife wound, Thea would have ignored the death before her eyes. However, this person was peculiar. Clearly dying, yet a surge of vitality was still replenishing his body, giving Thea a certain glimmer of excitement. Despite some suspicions, Thea pulled out the person's ID, pulled out his driver's license, and glanced at the name Pamela Isley. Sure enough, it was the infamous Poison Ivy. A plant-loving university student, a graduate of the elite Gotham University, this optimistic and kind-hearted woman was used as a test subject for a plant toxin. Surviving this ordeal, her blood transformed into chlorophyll, granting her the ability to control plants and secrete hormones to control others. But Thea's careful observation of her internal state revealed that she was far from surviving. Without external intervention, she would have been dead. Having experienced so many similar incidents, Thea had become somewhat immune. Perhaps her presence was the only explanation for her survival? Poison Ivy was both skilled and beautiful, making her a formidable subordinate, worthy of Thea's personal intervention. Thea hadn't figured out how to explain the divine blood to Tommy, so she decided to save the person first. Finding an empty house, Thea used her psychic power to support her and kicked the door open. After a thorough examination, Thea frowned. The reason for the other person's frequent deaths was the excessive vitality of the plants, consuming too many nutrients per unit time, which the body could neither absorb nor transform, forcing it to store them unnecessarily. However, even storage has its limits. Pamela's body was already at a critical point. In just a minute, she would explode from the excessive energy. Thea took out her magic sword and tested it, but the results were disappointing. The other person's energy wasn't magic or divine power, but simply exuberant vitality, and the magic sword had no effect on it. She lowered her head and thought through all the spells she knew, but found none of them were applicable. Sending light healing magic into the fire would only add fuel to the fire. Pamela would be shattered in 3 seconds. Not a minute. What should she do? Thea rubbed her chin, stumped. Was she supposed to use dark magic to counteract the vitality of the plant toxins? That would be too much effort. Perhaps this will work. Thea pulled a vial from her space ring. It contained the blood the Court of Owls had extracted from Solomon Grundy's heart that day. This blood had a highly corrosive property, so different from Thea's power system, that she had kept it unused. She incised Pamela's arm, wrapped a drop of grey blood in her mental power, and placed it into her vein. Suddenly confronted by an external enemy, Pamela's internal energy began a frantic counterattack, attempting to expel the grey blood from her body. However, the grey blood was also quite powerful, countering the overwhelming amount of green life energy without losing ground. However, the green life energy was too overwhelming, and the tiger was no match for the wolves. The grey blood eventually ran out of energy and dissipated like gas. It's working. Pamela's stored energy had been drained by a third. Thea added the remaining 2 drops, one by one. Half an hour passed. Who are you? Her energy was temporarily depleted, though her body was still constantly generating new energy. Pamela had regained consciousness. Seeing a stranger standing before her, although she was terrified, her body was weak and she could only speak in fragments. I'm the one who saved you. You remember what happened before? If it weren't for me, you would have died. Thea's words were not empty boasts. While there were not many people in this world who knew healing skills, there were always a few. But at this point, Thea was the only one who could treat her condition. I remember I want revenge. Pamela gritted her teeth. Very good, maintain this state. I don't know if you can understand me, but I'll just say this, your body has been completely transformed by the previous toxins. I've artificially reduced the time of your death, but time is running out. You need a comprehensive transformation to ensure you don't die from the toxin's energy. Thea explained her current situation as concisely as possible. My body, Pamela struggled to sit up, looking at her 2 green arms. The wounds Thea had inflicted were still there, but instead of blood, they were flowing out a green substance. Chlorophyll? Where's my blood? I've become a monster. Pamela covered her mouth, wanting to cry, but no tears came. My tear ducts are gone too. Am I still human? Faced with her question, Thea thought carefully. I don't know much about biology, but from a biological perspective, you're just a walking plant. But from a philosophical perspective, if you still accept the concept of being human, then you're still human. The first half of Thea's words made Pamela look gloomy, but the second half lifted her spirits. Why did you save me? Pamela whispered. I'm impressed by your abilities, Thea replied frankly, which made Pamela feel much better. America doesn't advocate selfless help, and Gotham's motto is useless people belong in the gutter. Pamela, though kind, wasn't foolish. She breathed a sigh of relief when she heard her abilities were appreciated. How does your so-called transformation work? Will it result in a drastic change in form? Thea pulled out another imitation yellow ring. The transformation process varies from person to person. During the transformation, it will read your true thoughts and strengthen them in a targeted manner. If you desperately want to return to your human form, perhaps my ring is your only option. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 Poison Ivy. I accept. It's a perfect choice for me. I'm willing to dedicate the rest of my life to it. Thea's words gave Pamela renewed hope. You don't need the rest of your life. My missions won't be many. You'll gain the strength to pursue your revenge, but the rest of your time is yours. You can continue tending to your garden and plants. Thea was pleased with her attitude. This guy was much more straightforward than Deathstroke. With a flick of her finger, a yellow ring flew in front of Pamela, emitting a faint glow. Reaching out to pick up the ring, she placed it on her middle finger. A faint yellow halo instantly enveloped Pamela. Thea casually cast a concealment spell. Damien's teaching mission was over tonight, and Batman would surely be on the loose. Barbara's birds of prey would also be roaming the city. To avoid any inquiries, it was best to avoid them. The replica ring's power was certainly inferior to the original, and the transformation would take several times longer. Pamela was bathed in a yellow glow. The transformation, though slow, was methodical. With peace of mind, Thea went to the rooftop to absorb the moonlight. The transformation lasted over 4 hours, and it wasn't until the early hours of the morning that Pamela's transformation was finally complete. Thea checked her ring's abilities. Most of her emotional energy had been used to restore her human form, and her once green skin had returned to normal. Yes, it looked normal. The transformation into a life form is irreversible, and the ring's energy only restored her skin color, with a slight green tint to her lips and eyes. The rest of her body appeared to have returned to normal. The only power Pamela gained from the yellow ring was the ability to summon plants from somewhere on Earth. These plants had to be plants she knew about, or even cultivated. Theoretically, she could find powerful plants from other planets, transplant them to Earth, and cultivate them. This summoning ability might seem insignificant, but it did compensate for the limitations of Poison Ivy's original timeline, significantly reducing her vulnerability to environmental influences during combat. Thea left her a message, telling her to take revenge as she pleased, but to avoid indiscriminate killing. Then, she left Earth and flew back to the planet where Grodd had been released. Deathstroke had already located the shark god, and for safety's sake, Thea decided to bring Grodd, a powerful force, along with her. By then, Deadman, Grodd, Deathstroke, Poison Ivy, and Thea would team up to take down a hairy Hawaiian deity that was easily taken down by a dozen agents. It shouldn't be a problem, right? They found Grodd again, only to find he'd grown even larger, from over 2 meters to 3 meters. His initial aggressiveness had completely vanished, and he lay peacefully on a large rock, surrounded by several native aliens who had evolved from insects, fanning him with large leaves. Thea casually pulled a banana from her space ring and threw it, hitting Grodd in the face with a bang. Grodd doesn't like bananas, echoed Thea's voice, a dull reflex of her own. Thea knew she was coming at the side of the banana. How is it going? Are you having fun here? Thanks to the gift of Martian Manhunter, Thea's telepathic abilities had evolved from their original roughness to a more refined level. Even basic teleportation wasn't as difficult as it once was. These guys are so clueless. Grodd glanced disdainfully at the primitives fanning him. Thea surveyed the surroundings. The natives truly had no idea how to serve this sudden, unseen killer. Fortunately, Grodd's anger wore off quickly, and he gradually accepted their submission. These creatures tried their best to please Grodd, but their intelligence was too low, and they kept repeating the same old tricks, which irritated Grodd. Let's go. I'll take you to a planet with a higher civilization. You'll gain greater power, Thea expressed confidence in Grodd. After all, he was a renowned villain in his original time and space. Even if Sinestro's standards were high, Grodd would be able to impress him. Sinestro had been active recently, secretly gathering strength. He had already left OA and returned to his home planet of Karuga. Thea first released the elk from her space ring to meet Grodd. The two spirits struck a chord. Both being Earth species and possessing telepathic abilities, they formed a positive initial impression. Then, under the ecstatic gaze of the native aliens, Thea placed Grodd in her space ring. She flew into space, opened a wormhole, and soared into the depths of the universe. Welcome to Karuga. What do you think of my kingdom? Sinestro, now in high spirits, had traded in the Green Lantern attire he had worn for years and was now openly appearing as a Yellow Lantern. This guy had finally chosen this path. Thea knew her tiny wings couldn't reach such a vast universe. Sinestro hadn't yet been stripped of his Green Lantern ring, but his separation from the Green Lantern Corps was imminent, and her role in that was only a matter of time. It's a wonderful place. Are you enforcing your order? Thea's eyes swept over the crowd. Sinestro relied on his immense willpower to control the ring, using its power to maintain order on the planet and monitor everyone's movements and heartbeats. He wanted to offer his people an ideal world, but in reality, his people feared and terrified him. The power of his yellow lantern ring grew daily, significantly increasing the power of Thea's ring as well. Perfect order is the foundation of a stable people's life, Sinestro said proudly. Thea didn't bother to explain the key point. He might or might not have known it, but it had nothing to do with her. Naturally, he had his nemesis, Hal Jordan, to contend with. Only when Sinestro died would the two co-originated lantern rings merge into one. Thea would then be the beneficiary, and she didn't want to waste time on his rebellion at such a crucial moment. I've recruited a new subordinate. You come and give him your guidance. The two briefly touched on the issue of governing the country. Thea explained the purpose of their trip, something they had previously agreed upon. She had 3 spots available. Whatever catches your eye must be this. What is this? Sinestro was halfway through his sentence when he was startled by Grodd, released from the space ring. There were many bizarre creatures in the universe, some 100 times stranger than Grodd. But Sinestro had recently crammed in a lot of knowledge about Earth's biology. Suspecting he'd seen it wrong, he used the lantern ring's identification function again. Holy crap! A real gorilla. According to Earth's classification system, it belongs to the primate mammals. Sinestro's face darkened. He pointed at Grodd and said to Thea, "Is this guy your new recruit? Are you kidding me? Last time you got a dead person. This time it's an animal. If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I will not agree." Chapter 339, Subordinates Gathered. I'm Grodd, not an animal, you purple-skinned eggplant. Sinestro hadn't finished his complaint when an unusually dull voice rang out in his heart. He couldn't help but glance at Grodd. Was it the ape who was speaking? Yes, Grodd has very powerful telepathic abilities. Thea didn't hear what Grodd said, but she could guess something from Sinestro's expression, and explained slowly. Telepathic abilities. Sinestro had a tyrannical mind, and he didn't care about what the purple-skinned eggplant said. He was measuring the strength of this ability. Originally, he thought that Grodd was 3 meters tall and weighed several tons, and was a melee fighter, but he didn't expect him to be a psychic. There are races in the universe that can control minds, and Sinestro has seen many, but most of them are physically weak. Psychics with a body as big as Grodd are very rare. Grodd's large nostrils snorted with dissatisfaction. Sinestro asked Thea, how far can its mind control go? Thea surveyed the people around Sinestro. She'd met Lisa Draco last time. Amin Su, Abinsu's son, whom she'd met a few times before, had also been tricked into yellow light. The remaining 2 were unfamiliar, one shrouded in black mist, and the other, an alien woman with a mouthful of fangs. The mist-covered figure was, unsurprisingly, the Weapon Master, a life-form from the antimatter universe whose power was somewhat unpredictable. Thea zeroed in on the fanged woman and sent a telepathic signal to Grodd. Grodd's mind control was silent, without explosion or flash of fire. The red-haired, fanged alien woman sauntered over to Thea's side. Carousel. Are you alright? Answer me, Sinestro shouted, but his subordinate, now completely controlled, slowly spoke. I am Grodd. Was he mistaken? Controlled so easily? Sinestro was incredulous, but the reality was clear, and he'd already recognized the stark difference between this particular ape and the one in the Lantern Ring database. In reality, Grodd's mind control would have succeeded even against Sinestro, but Thea didn't want to undermine his confidence. Lantern Ring users demanded a high level of mental capacity, and without a perfect mindset, Sinestro wouldn't have been able to launch a rebellion. Lantern rings of the same color could attack, but Thea and his ring were one, and they absolutely couldn't attack each other. The ring's judgment was strict, and any subjective intent would cause the fallen ring to seek another path. This was why, despite their apparent ulterior motives, neither of them engaged in a brawl. Thea's plan was to offer no resistance, even support his defection, allowing him and Hal Jordan to fight each other. Whether Sinestro died or returned to Green Lantern status, the 2 rings would reunite. She signaled Grodd to release the fanged woman, Carol Hill, from her mind control. The fanged woman's eyes flashed from confusion to terror in a split second. "What did you do to me?" Though her tone was interrogative, she didn't falter as she sprinted back to Sinestro. Sinestro nodded silently. "Your Earth has so many strange creatures. Grodd can join the Yellow Lantern Corps, and he'll fight for me, right, of course, but he'll have to come back to Earth with me first to do some work. I'll let him stay with you after that." Thea smiled happily. Grodd's mind control ability was a combination of her initial suggestion and his burgeoning mental power. As long as his abilities remained, his loyalty was guaranteed. Thea didn't want him to stay on Earth permanently. Seeing more of the universe would broaden his horizons, and he wouldn't think of himself as so peculiar. The two finalized the agreement. Sinestro gave Grodd a new lantern ring, while Thea registered the names of the individuals in the Parallax book. For some reason, Grodd's combat uniform, now fitted with a lantern ring, wasn't a tight-fitting suit. Instead, it had shoulder and arm guards, resembling a suit of armor. This armored ape resembles Vegeta's giant ape transformation, leaving Thea speechless. She was a little disappointed with Grodd's materialization abilities. His imagination was too limited, and the objects he materialized were all things like scalpels and electric drills, with 2 bananas mixed in. She'd better explore his imagination later. Thea considered her journey complete. Grodd had transitioned from an Earth creature to a cosmic one. If he wanted to enhance his materialization, he needed to observe and contemplate more. His knowledge and perspective would gradually broaden, and this process would even offset his hatred for humans. Saying goodbye to Sinestro and the others, Thea returned to Earth with Grodd. Deathstroke had already relayed the news to the Shark God. This wasn't a just act. Thea didn't call Diana. Instead, she recalled the dead playing off-world and prepared to confront them with a few of her men. "So, did you get your revenge?" Thea went to Poison Ivy's residence first. She was sitting by the window, knees hugged, lost in thought. Pamela didn't answer Thea's question. Her voice was a little hoarse. "The school revoked my enrollment. They actually thought I was dead, haha." She was clearly smiling, but there was no joy in her words. Thea didn't know how to comfort her. Pamela wiped her face twice, habitually, but there was still no trace of tears. "What do you need me for?" "I want to help you expand your worldview, let you see how narrow your previous world is. Change your clothes and follow me." Pamela was a little skeptical, but suggestion convinced her. She changed her clothes and followed. Thea sensed the direction of the death knell and opened a blue portal in a deserted place. The two of them walked through. After watching the enchantress use teleportation so many times, Thea had also summarized her knowledge of space. A portal can't be too large, as it wastes magic power unnecessarily. Too small will make the teleporter very uncomfortable. Thea couldn't open a portal easily yet, but she could cast a spell in advance to create a safe and comfortable portal. "Is this little girl the one you've recruited to help you slay the gods?" Deathstroke, dressed in standard combat fatigues and carrying twin blades, asked. Thea was masked, so he could only tell she was female, knowing nothing else. Pamela, however, hadn't concealed her features at all. Dressed simply like a modern college student, and feeling dazed from the teleportation, she looked a bit dull to Deathstroke. Everyone has their youthful days. "You weren't much better than her when you debuted, were you?" "She has great potential," Thea explained casually. Poison Ivy's future achievements were extraordinary, and Thea was ready to hand over the task of training her to Slade. Did he always like to be the older one, calling everyone a child? Let him train Poison Ivy slowly. Chapter 340 discovered. Deathstroke didn't believe a student like Pamela could be of any help. In fact, he even considered her inferior to Oliver from Purgatory Island. At least Oliver was a grown man. "I've been on this lousy island for a day now, and you said we had 2 helpers. Where are they?" Deathstroke didn't want to dwell on Pamela's question, he just wanted to see what the god Thea was talking about was. Thea looked to the left of Deathstroke's head. Boston Brand, dressed in a bright red tights, was grimacing, somewhat speechless. "He's here, Boston. Bring the lantern ring and introduce them," Thea said. The manifestation of the dead is a complete body, able to be seen and spoken. Without the lantern ring, even if Thea cast true sight on them, they could only see but not communicate. Suddenly, seeing a figure appear above him, Deathstroke instinctively drew his knife. "Who is it?" Thea didn't answer immediately. Instead, she summoned Grodd from her space ring and began introducing her subordinates one by one. A dead man and a gorilla. Poison Ivy felt her worldview shattered, and for a moment she was stunned. Deathstroke Slade, far more capable than she was, pointed at the dead man with suspicion in his eyes and asked, "You said this guy is dead?" "He's just a spirit now," Thea corrected, "in spirit form, the only unique being in the world between life and death." "Everything else you said is correct." Slade then pointed at Grodd and asked, "Is this a gorilla with superpowers?" Before Thea could answer, Grodd extended his hand, and a telepathic message echoed in his mind. "Grodd really likes the smell of your blood." Slade dazedly shook the gorilla's hand, thus introducing himself to this eccentric teammate. At this point, Poison Ivy and the dead man joined in the conversation. "Are you really Boston Brand? My classmates and I saw your trapeze act." Boston Brand was well versed in dealing with girls like this. Furthermore, having returned to Earth and met Pamela, a fellow Gotham native, he engaged in a flowery conversation. Thea had been observing the group. Generally speaking, Slade and Grodd got along well, and the dead man and Poison Ivy could also chat. This was due to geographical ties and personality traits. Thea wasn't afraid of them uniting and turning against her. She wanted to maintain cohesion among them, but not too much. "Okay, we're all acquainted now. Deathstroke, tell them about the mission." Thea interrupted them at the right moment. Slade quickly pulled his hand out of the gorilla's grasp and shook hands with a giant gorilla. This was a unique experience he wouldn't have imagined 10 minutes ago. Even though the gorilla was well-spoken, knowledgeable, and agreed with many of his views, Slade still felt both amused and embarrassed. A gorilla praised him and agreed with him. What expression should he make? Clearing his throat, he said, "Everyone, we're currently approximately 80 nautical miles from the main island of Hawaii. This island isn't even marked on military maps. I suspect there's some kind of strong magnetic field nearby. This island isn't uninhabited. On the contrary, there are several villages of primitive people. Unaware of the changes in the outside world and the smallness of their own space, they believe this island is the entire world. Our target is the deity they worship, the shark god of Hawaiian legend. That's all I know." "Well done." Gathering so much information in such a short period of time was no small feat, and Thea naturally praised them generously. "Although this deity is officially a god, I've calculated it's probably the weakest of the lowly. Divine power is proportional to devotion. You may all be familiar with the Greek and Norse pantheons, but have any of you heard of the Hawaiian pantheon?" Thea, fearing their doubts, reassured them beforehand. Deathstroke was fearless. He'd do anything for a fee. Grodd didn't take human gods seriously either. Not to mention the dead. He's already dead, so who can do anything to him? Only Poison Ivy remained somewhat fearful, but seeing the others' nonchalant expressions inadvertently bolstered her courage. "Where exactly is the target?" Thea asked Deathstroke. "We don't speak the same language, so I couldn't get it," Deathstroke said, a little embarrassed. Thea remained non-committal. The lantern ring could translate languages, but the languages of the dozens or hundreds of natives were likely too primitive for the lantern ring to comprehend. Without a common language, even the best interrogation skills of Slade were useless. Opening the Eye of Horus, he quickly located a native with leaves wrapped around his waist. Using Martian Manhunter's super long-range telepathy, he bypassed the language barrier and read their thoughts directly. After 2 minutes, Thea severed the connection and pointed to the west side of the island. This way, the group followed a winding path deeper into the island. The path showed signs of simple repairs, but the native tools were crude, and since no one usually traversed it, it still looked quite desolate. "Are there really gods in this world?" Poison Ivy whispered to the dead figure floating beside her. "There should be. After all, if someone like me, who is neither alive nor dead, exists, then it's reasonable that there must be several gods," the dead man replied quietly. Poison Ivy muttered something inaudible and followed the others. They stopped and started along the way. Thea didn't dare use the Eye of Horus directly to investigate, and could only constantly adjust their route based on the memories of the natives. "This is it. I can already sense traces of divine power, but it's very faint." Thea led the others to the entrance of a large cave. She wasn't trying to comfort them, but the divine power she felt was minimal, not even compared to Diana's, and even less than Thea herself. "Everyone, be alert. They've discovered us." Thea had originally planned a surprise attack, but she forgot that Grodd was a large man. His weight made a thumping sound as he walked, and the men inside would have to be deaf to miss him. Slade immediately drew his 2 swords, and a pistol hovered behind him to his left. Poison Ivy, a bit nervous, reflexively summoned a multitude of plants. Under her control, the lush green vegetation grew rapidly, filling the entire cave in seconds. "Who dares to disturb the great shark god?" Camo. Have you decided on the manner of your death? Kneel now and beg for my forgiveness. I can spare you a painful death. Kneel. Accept this great mercy. Deep in the cave, a figure sat on a tall stone chair, static electricity swirling around it. In the dim light, it could be seen that it was a giant, clad entirely in blue. The giant had a highly anthropomorphic head, with several fin-like wrinkles on top, gills behind its ears, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. It glared menacingly at the intruders. Chapter 341 The God Who Didn't Show His Power. The giant, standing over 3 meters tall and sitting at the highest point in the cave, gazed down at the group. Seeing they didn't kneel trembling like the natives, he felt a little annoyed and slowly stood up. His blue body was etched with numerous unknown patterns, and it was the static electricity emanating from these patterns that kept the cave from being completely dark. Your tragic fate is already sealed, the giant stood up, but didn't attack immediately. His massive arms waved, and to the uninitiated, he looked like he was giving a speech. Stop talking nonsense. Get him, Thea had been observing since entering the cave. Considering the glorious history of this guy in the original time and space, where Amanda's dozen agents had taken him down, she didn't think he was that strong. His incessant chatter annoyed her, and, not wanting to speculate on his abilities, he flung out materialization chains to bind the giant's feet. Thea's thinking was simple. Without knowing his abilities, she'd try to limit his speed. After all, the three of them, a dead man and a gorilla, were not tanks. Grodd, despite his bulk, was strictly a mage, so a ranged attack was the safest option. Poison Ivy was the first to respond to her command. She manipulated countless plants, a fraction of a second slower than Thea. A blanket of vegetation enveloped the giant, some of the bizarre-looking plants even belching purple and red vapors. Poison Ivy's first battle was a bit too aggressive, with no regard for plant damage. She unleashed a plethora of toxins, neurotropic, hemolytic, paralytic, and hallucinogenic. She wasn't even familiar with the properties of many of the plants, and they all pelted the giant's face, turning its once majestic blue visage a vibrant green. An expression of anger crossed the giant's face before it froze in a daze, and Grodd's mind control followed. The dead man, slightly slower, cast a fear spell and then proceeded to take over his body. The giant's legs were bound with chains, his upper body tightly bound by plants. In his mental world, Grodd struggled to control himself, while the dead struggled to squeeze into him. Fear was wearing down his defenses, and the plant toxins were paralyzing his body, weakening his mental resistance. Oh my god, Thea was stunned. Her team was so strong, each with a control skill, leaving this air-breathing creature completely powerless. However, they lack a tank and high-damage characters, so they needed to work on that aspect in the future. By the way, I don't have to go in, do I? Slade, holding two long swords, glanced fearfully in the direction of the giant. Poison Ivy was still controlling the plants to spray poison, the air tinged green, and these gases didn't seem to have any health-enhancing properties. Poison Ivy, stop spraying. Thea quickly restrained the slightly overexcited Poison Ivy. Even after consuming the earth fruit, she couldn't claim to be completely immune to these chaotic gases, let alone Slade and Grodd. This wasn't a game, the damage done to teammates couldn't be ignored. Whoosh, Poison Ivy quickly stopped. The torrent of spray had taken its toll on her body. She paused, resting her hands on her knees, breathing heavily. Thea watched from where she stood, ignoring the sword's absorption process. It would be troublesome if Poison Ivy's poison were absorbed by her. She waited a moment, until the giant's body returned from green to blue. She knew it was an instinctive reaction. The giant's soul had been controlled, but his body was repelling the plant toxins. The opportunity had arrived. Thea drew her sword and strode forward. Unsheathed, the sword shone with a faint crimson light in the dark cave. It sensed a portion of Thea's thoughts and was excited to be saturated with divine blood. With a muffled puff, the sword plunged straight into the giant's presumed heart. Is that all the divine power? Thea carefully felt the divine power transmitted by the sword, tiny, weak, and intermittent. Dissatisfied, she drew her sword again and stabbed 3 times. Deep blue, fist-sized divine power settled within her like a ball of water. Weakling, by the 5th stab, Thea could no longer absorb anything and turned to look at Grodd. The gorilla rubbed his chin, his voice echoing through her mind. Either this guy's spiritual realm suddenly surged, resisting my mind control, or he's dead. The dead also floated out. He's probably dead? His soul has dissipated, Too weak. Thea could only conclude that this guy might have some increased strength and speed, but not much. He boasted so fiercely, perhaps just a boaster. My men report that agents from the I Society have arrived at the U.S. military base in Hawaii, Slade said, feeling he wasn't helping the fight, and reported rather servilely. Thea carefully examined the divine power she had drawn. She wondered if it could even be converted into water-attributed magic. But with the I Society's arrival, they had no choice but to retreat. Erase all traces of our battle, including the footprints on the road. Deathstroke, your top-notch reconnaissance expert, handle this. Actually, there wasn't any intense fighting here. The enemy was killed without even firing a single blow. The problem was that poison ivy had too many plants, many of which were clearly not native to Hawaii and needed to be cleared away. Ordering Deathstroke and Poison Ivy to clean up the traces, Thea instructed Grant and the dead man to search the area for any valuables while she focused on the shark god's corpse. Tisk, tisk, it looks quite large, but why is it so useless? Thea examined the corpse over and over for a long time. The ornamentation on it was worth studying, but beyond that, it was of no value. Horus was a top-tier second-rate figure, but this one wasn't even close. Take it back. If that doesn't work, chop it up and feed it to the elk and heifer. After much deliberation, Thea couldn't figure out a use for the corpse and sheepishly put it into her space ring. I've captured a prisoner. But this guy has a very low intelligence, Grodd's voice sounded, and he came over holding a fishman that was less than 1 meter tall. The fishman's head was in the shape of a shark, and his body was in human form. He looked at the intruders tremblingly. Thea used the Eye of Horus to observe. This guy also had some divine power in his body, but it was weaker than the guy who just died. Is this the Shark King of the Suicide Squad in the future? From the perspective of ordinary people, it is quite powerful when it grows up. It's a pity to kill it now. This thing is not very intelligent, and it would be a good hand to keep it as a guard. Thea waved her hand and said, take it away. Chapter 342, Quinn's Bodyguard Captain. Even as a child, King Shark wasn't particularly good-looking, so Thea couldn't bring him back to Quinn Manor to raise him. After Deathstroke cleared the island of any traces of foot traffic, she assigned him the tasks of training Poison Ivy and raising King Shark. Deathstroke, having witnessed Poison Ivy's strength, wasn't too averse to the task. Thea softly chanted a spell, and a small dust spell descended into the cave, seemingly deserted. Then, with a nod, she opened a portal and left the island. Poison Ivy and Deathstroke went to training, while Grodd was allowed to play freely. Grodd was to return to the Yellow Lantern Corps to keep tabs on Sinestro's progress. Thea's only requirement for him was to learn and observe, and to simply slack off in combat. Thea returned to Star City alone, intending to absorb the divine power to increase her water magic. This process required a significant amount of divine power, and Thea slowly absorbed it for 3 days, without sleep, before finally forming a faint trace of water magic within her. It's been tough. After 3 days without rest, her body was still damp. Thea took a brisk shower and was now drying her hair with a towel. The shark god was too weak. After transforming his body, his divine power was almost gone. Thea barely managed to replenish a bit of water, but the entire energy was completely depleted. To achieve a balance of properties, Thea also converted a small amount of magic from the other 4 attributes into water. While water doesn't have high attack power or healing effects, it offers excellent compatibility, allowing Thea to finally unleash the hybrid magic she'd been researching for a long time. The lightning breath she exhaled when manifesting Diablo was arguably her most powerful attack. However, the process of manifesting, manipulating, mixing, and finally releasing the energy took too long, and few villains would be so foolish as to wait and see the whole process without attacking first. Furthermore, this demonic image was far from righteous, and Thea was constantly considering alternatives. By incorporating Zeus lightning bolts into her manifested lightning breath, Thea finally found her future path, lightning magic blending fire, wind, and water. It was powerful, fast, and seemingly righteous. Thea's magical abilities had surpassed the limitations of the Constantine family's magic book, and she was forging her own path. Thea, let me introduce you to John Diggle. He's incredibly skilled and perfectly qualified to be your bodyguard. He served in Afghanistan the same year as me, and he's also mine. Layla Michaels, dressed in a black suit, introduced Thea to the large black man beside her. He's also your husband, isn't he? Thea was speechless at this young woman who promoted her without hesitation. With her increasing workload, especially her new venture into the medical field, which would result in countless job losses, she had already seen 2 small-scale kidnappings and assassinations this month. Although she considered these men's movements to be as slow as a snail, and bullets wouldn't penetrate their defenses, it was still annoying. It was like acting out a scene every time, using coincidences to eliminate opponents. It was truly a hassle. She'd just impulsively decided to hire some retired agents from the AI to bolster her image. But she'd never expected it. Lyra actually pulled out her husband, a stay-at-home mom. She knew Thea's abilities. And if this job ever got dangerous, who would protect whom? Of course, to be fair, John Diggle was a capable fighter, a proven fact of the future Green Arrow team's trio. Lyra had a difficult time figuring it out. Her husband's constant stay-at-home schedule, doing laundry and cooking, could easily affect a man's mindset, while her AI would be unsuitable for the straightforward Diggle. When Thea and Amanda brought it up, Lyra firmly accepted the assignment. Amanda, unable to disrespect her deputy over such a small matter, agreed without much thought. Lyra didn't tell her husband about Thea's abilities. Diggle had a strong sense of pride. If he'd known he was just a freeloader, a job he could do with or without, he'd have quit. Such a well-paid and secure bodyguard job is rare in the world. At least from Leela's perspective, she couldn't find anyone on Earth more capable than Thea. As for her husband's infidelity, she didn't have to worry about it. Although Thea and Diana were elusive, the Eye of Heaven still had some intelligence, making it easy to analyze their relationship. Her husband was as black as coal, so he was perfectly safe. Welcome, Mr. Diggle. If you have nothing else to do, from today on, you'll be responsible for my personal security. Leela could roughly guess Leela's intentions, but there was no need to reveal them. She wanted to keep it secret, and the Eye of Heaven didn't want to cause any large-scale supernatural phenomena. Keeping all those clowns at the level of ordinary people was a good idea. I'll start work today. The black man had been idle at home for over a year. He didn't know Thea's strength, but he felt the time was short and the task was heavy, so he immediately summoned several of Quinn's bodyguards to assign tasks. Is this your husband? Thea asked Leela quietly until the black man was out of sight. Haha. Yeah, Leela chuckled dryly, feeling a little embarrassed by the fact that he had come so blatantly to receive a salary for nothing. Thea didn't mind, feeling only that her butterfly wings were growing larger and larger. John Diggle had arrived at Quinn's house as a bodyguard beforehand. What a strange fate. Over the next few days, Big Brother Black diligently performed his duties, recruiting several more bodyguards and setting up a meticulous protection plan. Not to mention, he finally caught the attacker, and having realized his personal worth, Big Brother Black was even more elated. Unlike when he protected Oliver in the original Time and Space, Thea was a woman after all, and he couldn't provide 24/7 personal protection. But Thea wasn't running around the city like Oliver did either, so overall, both host and guest were enjoying themselves. Thea's secret base. That's artificial intelligence, the one exclaiming was naturally Miss Felicity Smoke, who had just returned from a business trip to the Red Room in Detroit. At first, she thought Thea was joking. Artificial intelligence? Are you kidding me? How could something so sci-fi exist in reality? But when the 3D projection of Gideon greeted her, the former hacker was completely stunned. Fortunately, the secret base was deep underground, well insulated, so her screams went unnoticed. Is it really artificial intelligence? After getting Thea's affirmative answer, Felicity's eyes widened. Afraid that she was dazzled. She used her hands to probe back and forth in Gideon's 3D image before finally confirming that she was not dazzled or hallucinating, and that the things in the movie world were vividly presented before her eyes. Chapter 343 The First Confrontation with Luther. Is this also an alien product? Felicity, having seen a fair bit of the world in the Red Room, couldn't help but wonder. Thea remained non-committal. She needed Felicity's computer knowledge to strengthen Gideon, or rather, to constrain artificial intelligence. Countless films and television series have revealed the devastating impact of unchecked AI on humanity. Gideon, aboard the Waverider, had even developed emotions, a development Thea couldn't help but be wary of. This. I need to study it carefully, Thea ordered Gideon to show her the source code. Felicity's eyes sparkled after reading a couple of lines, then she completely ignored Thea and began tinkering away on several machines. The former hacker worked all day, and Thea had to stop her because she'd forgotten to eat, and if Thea ignored her, she'd starve herself to death. Felicity was so excited that she immediately poured out her research. Thea was bewildered by the algorithms and logical connections she spoke of. In her words, Gideon was the epitome of perfection and refinement. When do you think we can start designing our mechanical armor? Thea didn't care about the AI build, as long as it didn't rebel. Right now, Felicity mumbled, still chewing something. Let's get started. Designing the Iron Man suit wasn't too difficult. It used the Atom suit as a foundation, combined with Quinn Corporation's newly developed new energy source. Dozens of Quinn Corporation researchers studied it, and found that a single cubic centimeter of white dwarf debris weighed a ton. With the right output, this tiny fragment could power a city of 1 million people for years. This massive energy source was more than enough to power the Iron Man suit. Ray Palmer, the Atom of the original Time and Space, only acquired the new energy technology after merging with Quinn Corporation. His suit initially used white dwarfs for energy, but unfortunately, these high-density, high-temperature stellar fragments were extremely unstable, and a violent explosion accidentally atomized him. Thea didn't need to follow his path. The Red Room Labs had the product she needed, a white dwarf stabilizer, a small box tucked inside her armor. It steadily output the energy from a white dwarf star. If the enemy proved difficult, the stabilizer's limits could be lifted, allowing it to operate at 200% or even 300% power for a minute. It was clear that aliens were more than an era ahead of Earth in energy use. In her secret base, Thea built a state-of-the-art machining workshop, where artificial intelligence drew the blueprints and robotic arms completed the work. Everything flowed smoothly. Her life gradually settled into normalcy. She delegated group affairs to the CEOs, spent her days studying feudal magic and her weekends delving into modern science to manufacture mechanical armor. She spent her evenings teaching Damien and her weekends traveling the world with Diana. Her days were joyful and fulfilling. While she was happy, others were naturally unhappy. The launch of the medical pods impacted a significant number of medical workers. They used to be able to enjoy a leisurely day with 2 surgeries, but now, they could operate every 10 minutes, and patients could be home within 2 hours. This was a more than 10-fold improvement in efficiency. The Medical Practitioners Union, the Trauma Healing Union, the Nurses Union, the Attending Physicians Union, and a host of other unions Thea had never heard of rallied in protest, marching, demonstrating, and launching petitions. In the end, seeing no one at Quinn Corporation took them seriously, they appealed to the federal court. Under the system of separation of powers, for unknown reasons, the court accepted the case. Thea, still developing her own weapons system, had no choice but to attend the preliminary hearing. Ms. Quinn, don't be nervous. You don't need to say anything, said Diggle, the black bodyguard who didn't understand the situation. Thea, these are minor issues. Don't get excited, said Lyra Michaels of the Eye, who believed she understood her abilities. Calm down, you absolutely must, said the Martian Manhunter, posing as the director of the Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. He feared that Thea would become enraged and unleash her fury, and because of his pyrophobia, he couldn't stop her. The 3 people's words seemed similar in meaning, but in reality, they differed greatly. Thea was now maintaining a detached attitude. These loud, slogan-raising protesters posed zero threat to her. A single, widespread fear spell would have 80% of them pissing their pants. She glanced at Martian Manhunter, who was maintaining a vigilant and focused presence. Hey, who's behind these guys? Thea's question echoed in her mind. I don't know. The boss and the AIO haven't received any information, but it's undoubtedly Lex Luthor. Martian Manhunter shared his suspicions without hiding anything from her. Thea curled her lips and said nothing. Luthor was too controlling, refusing to tolerate dissenting voices within his sphere of influence. He had waited until today to launch a tactic, but it was already too late. However, this was merely a test, a way to gauge the strength of the government and military's support for Thea. Only after determining the bottom line could he proceed. She had to create some trouble for him. Should she send Deathstroke or Poison Ivy? After some deliberation, Thea concluded that Poison Ivy was the better choice. Luthor was also wielding advanced technology, while Deathstroke was well known. If they were discovered, it would be very troublesome. As expected, Thea remained silent throughout the preliminary hearing and press conference until she left. That same night, paranormal activity began to occur in the Luthor building. Occasionally, overworked employees would go berserk and assault their supervisors. Initially thought to be isolated incidents, 3 such incidents within 3 days clearly signaled a problem. Did you do this? Martian Manhunter confronted Thea early in the morning, shoving a newspaper into her hands. Thea opened the paper and saw, It was the Daily Planet, Luthor's unfavorable newspaper. The entire front page was devoted to the Luthor Corporation's rampant exploitation of labor. The writer wasn't Lois Lane, but his style was even more pointed, describing the Luthor Corporation as a sweatshop. She flatly denied Martian Manhunter's accusations. "Don't talk nonsense. You're a master of mind control." "This isn't a form of mind control," Thea said, giving a look of disdain. Poison Ivy's methods appeared and disappeared without a trace. Who could have imagined that some plants could be so powerful? Martian Manhunter had naturally visited the scene to observe, and he indeed found no trace of mind control. But this only made him even more puzzled. Who could have done this? Remain restrained. Don't let this situation escalate. Leaving these two words, he hurried back to continue searching for clues. Chapter 344 Power Armor. The news media was buzzing for the next few days. One day, it was about the Quinn Group, forcing a once middle-class doctor to beg on the streets. The next day, it was about the Luthor Group's relentless overtime driving several employees insane. The two sides engaged in a series of back-and-forth exchanges, each maintaining a delicate line, refusing to risk loss of life. Just as several domestic analysts were speculating on the situation, things suddenly subsided. No one sued Thea on the streets, and the Luthor Group experienced any more paranormal activity. Just as the incident had begun, it suddenly appeared and then vanished from everyone's sight. Thea didn't participate too much, as her armor had already reached its final stage. Power system intact, propulsion system intact, auxiliary operating system intact. 3, 2, 1, start. In the secret base, Felicity carefully monitored the various indicators on the display screen. Thea stood in front of her on the left, 4 robotic arms rapidly assembling the Iron Man suit they had painstakingly crafted. Unlike Iron Man next door, Thea possesses sufficient combat power. She simply requires some powerful defense, not fully enclosed armor. Her armor resembles Dr. Doom more than Iron Man's. Traditional metals cannot perfectly blend with magic, so Thea, after much deliberation, ultimately retrieved the corpse of the shark god, Camo. Disemboweling and ripping it apart wouldn't even begin to describe her brutality. The inner layer is made of traditional metal, housing the auxiliary operating system and energy transmission systems. The outer layer contains Camo's remains. Though weak, Camo is a deity after all, and his body possesses considerable magical conductivity. Thea has inscribed numerous practical magic arrays on this layer, including spells for strength, agility, and endurance, all of which enhance overall performance. The outermost layer is constructed entirely of hafnium, a metal that can only be synthesized artificially. Its exceptional hardness, melting point, and mass make it the most suitable material for Thea's armor. Hafnium possesses the ability to withstand direct nuclear bombs, making it the most suitable material for Thea's armor. Without the need for Iron Man's enveloping full-body armor, there naturally weren't as many areas requiring fastening. While joint defense was lower, the agility was significantly greater than Tony Stark's straight punch, straight kick attack. Thea quickly dressed, donning shoulder pads, chest guards, arm guards, and leg guards. She donned a silver-white helmet. The Eye of Horus suppressed all detection equipment. There was no visor, but a mask would appear during combat to conceal the face. The armor was silver-white with red patterns. As a symbol of the future, a cape was essential. The two argued again about the cape's color. Shouldn't it be green? A green cape with silver-white armor seems to go well with it. Felicity, remembering the skateboard color debate from that day, insisted on green. Thea sweet dropped. Silver armor, green cape? Isn't that Dr. Doom? Will he come from another dimension to fight me? The same old rhetoric was used again, about how green easily evokes decay and decay, a bunch of nonsense. Ultimately, Thea prevailed, sporting a red cape, the same color as her skateboard from that day. After getting dressed, they needed to perform some tests. The first was strength. Even a child knows the saying strength conquers skill. Superman and Diana both relied on strength to crush their opponents. Later Shazam and Black Adam, though clearly magic-based, also engaged in fistfights daily, demonstrating the importance of strength. 500 tons, 620 tons, 700 tons, 770 tons, the final strength level was 850 tons, but that was only at 50% of the White Dwarf's power. If pushed to full capacity, It could easily exceed 1,000 tons. The next test was speed. Thea, powered by magic, flew at around 700 kilometers per hour. With the yellow lantern ring operating at full power, she could exceed Mach 2 within the atmosphere, but it couldn't sustain it, as emotions drained her quickly. The Iron Man's propulsion system comes from the Red Room. Its full name is the Rotating Core Power Amplifier. It converts the energy of a white dwarf into propulsion, capable of consistently exceeding the speed of sound, or Mach 1. While it might seem inferior to the lantern ring, it has no power consumption, boasts formidable defense, and features optical camouflage for stealth. From a stealth and safety perspective, it surpasses the lantern ring. Is the weapons system still being tested? Thea asked, dodging the satellites and circling the area at low altitude before returning to the secret base. Let's give it a try. With the energy supply from the white dwarf, the freeze guns will surely last longer. Without giving much thought to the weapons system, they simply installed freeze guns, one in each hand. Thea was somewhat dismissive of the Red Room Laboratory's white noise cannons. Their cone-shaped sonic attack had low lethality, and Dr. Silas Stone covered it tightly, so anyone who didn't know could mistake them for some powerful weapon. Adding them to the arms improved the freeze gun's endurance and firing speed. A 20-square-meter room could now be completely frozen in a second. Remember, when Thea's freeze gun attacked Enchantress, it took half a minute to freeze the small room. Before the test was completed, the two unexpectedly discovered a hidden property of the armor: it possessed excellent underwater combat capabilities. Gideon calculated that it could reach a speed of 1,500 knots underwater, practically faster than air. This was undoubtedly due to the effects of Camus' corpse. Thea couldn't help but wonder, perhaps this guy wasn't a weakling. From this little bit of data, it could be concluded that he was incredibly powerful underwater. The fastest underwater speed in this world is probably the superhero Aquaman. Wielding his legendary trident, he can swim at a speed of 10,000 feet per second, or over 3,000 meters, which translates to nearly 6,000 knots per hour. Ah, Thea said, glancing down at the remains of Camus. He probably died with his eyes wide open. Having been outmaneuvered by the control skills of her and the others on land, she never fully realized her true abilities until her death. If it weren't for the suit of armor, she would have been labeled a worthless piece of shit. There's no end in sight for armor development, especially since Thea was a little displeased that the first suit of armor she'd ambitiously researched was actually water combat armor. Furthermore, how to quickly equip herself was a pressing issue. The only thing Thea could think of was using the magic absorption feature to quickly change outfits, but that should be considered for the next suit of armor. Her defense issue was temporarily resolved, and the only thing left was the safety of those around her. Luther had subsided, but the harassment from the scoundrels continued. Thea specifically instructed the Black Boss, Diggle, to protect the CEOs of the group. She also crafted a small freezing gun for Felicity, which would be very effective if the bodyguards were unreliable. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345 Green Arrow? Less than 2 days after the steel armor was completed, Thea, still working on it, was called out for lunch. The one who invited her was none other than Shadow, a beautiful young forensic doctor at the Star City Police Department. "Is your father feeling better?" Thea asked casually, putting down her bag. "Still the same, but he looks a lot better." They chatted for a moment, and Shadow, checking to see if anyone was around, explained in Chinese the purpose of the meeting. "You want to be a superhero and fight crime?" Thea was a little surprised by Shadow's words. Someone from an unspeakable country traveling across the ocean to become a superhero seemed odd. "Yes, the crime rate in Star City has been on the rise lately. Many criminals have been released due to insufficient evidence after being apprehended. Star City is my home now, and I want to help," Shadow said with a serious expression. Thea had heard about these things. Malcolm's departure had created a vacuum in Star City's underground forces, and many criminals he had previously suppressed were beginning to resurface. Coupled with the increase in immigration to Star City over the past 2 years, the existing conflicts between locals and outsiders had also led to a surge in violent elements in the city. The recent minor troubles faced by the Quinn group were closely related to these individuals' eagerness to get ahead, but Thea was so busy that she didn't have the energy to fight criminals. Perhaps this person is a good candidate? Thea kept sizing up Shadow, looking at her with awe. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Let's go to my secret base. I'll introduce you to a friend. Oh, no, you know someone, Thea said, leaving Shadow baffled, and then she led her to her secret base. Miss Felicity Smoke, the computer whiz, you should have met her. She's been my assistant, providing me with support. This is Shadow. She wants to be a superhero. I think you could use some cooperation, since I'm not in Star City a lot. The two women knew each other before, though they weren't close. Now that they shared some secrets, their relationship blossomed. Thea waited for them to chat for a few minutes before asking, Shadow, how do you want to fight crime? Shadow didn't hesitate. I want to follow in my father's footsteps. I use a bow and arrow. Her tone was firm and resolute. Thea's eye twitched slightly, and she asked uncertainly, a green suit? Yes. Thea was completely speechless. Green clothes, using a bow and arrow. Isn't this Green Arrow's early appearance? Perhaps a code name like Green Arrow? Green. Felicity hadn't been participating in the conversation, but when she heard the topic of green, she couldn't help but join in, giving Shadow a discerning smile. Her smile puzzled Shadow, but she responded with a gentle smile. Let me see your skills, Thea said, tossing her bow and arrow. Pop! Shadow fired 10 arrows in a row. The first few were a bit awkward, but the last few were her best. Not bad, Thea thought for a moment, and could only reply. While Shadow's archery skills might be considered impressive to the average person, Thea felt they lacked strength, speed, and accuracy. Compared to Thea herself, Old Ma, and the future Oliver, there was a gap. Shadow also understood her own level. Father once said, I'm not strong enough. No matter how much I practice archery, I'll only reach this level. Try these on, Thea said, tossing her a pair of gauntlets. These were a transitional product between the robotic arm and steel armor. They simply increased strength, but were of little use to Thea. They had been sitting there gathering dust since their development. The Shadow was clever, slipping on the gauntlets smoothly. The surge of strength astonished her. She picked up the bow and arrow, gave it a powerful tug, and with a snap, the bow broke. 1 ton of force. The gauntlet can be adjusted. Try again. Xia tossed her another bow and arrow. This time, Shadow didn't exert her strength suddenly. The increased strength allowed her to draw the bowstring to its fullest, instantly increasing the speed of her arrows. 10 arrows pierced the target. This astonished Shadow, who removed the gauntlets and carefully felt the difference in power. As a member of Xia's team, she needed technological equipment. Xia took out all the gear she had worn that day. Are you afraid of heights? Xia asked. Shadow shook her head. What kind of archer is afraid of heights? Jumping around on treetops and eaves every day, what's the point of being afraid of heights? Xia couldn't give her Xia's atomized skateboard. First, the color was wrong. Wearing a red skateboard on a green dress would look odd. Second, the skateboard was linked to Xia's brain waves, making it unusable by anyone else. Fortunately, their machining capabilities had advanced significantly compared to 4 years ago, allowing Gideon to further optimize the structure, eliminating the need for the haphazard assembly process. In less than an hour, a new skateboard was ready. Thea also prepared a Kevlar combat suit for Shadow. They were of similar build, with Shadow slightly shorter. She was equipped with various technological arrows, essentially replicating the equipment Thea had brought to Gotham that day. Watching Shadow fly 2 beautiful circles outside, Thea decided to offer some cold water. Your melee combat isn't good enough. If you don't want to use firearms, you need to improve your melee skills. Father only taught me archery. Come on, attack me. Only when I'm satisfied can you go out and fight criminals. Thea considered Yao Fei's melee skills top-notch. In her eyes, Yao Fei's wasn't much better, and Shadow, his daughter, was even worse. Expecting her to achieve world-shattering feats was impossible, but at least she needed to be able to fight back. The next few days began with Shadow's training. Later, Thea, adhering to the principle of herding 1 sheep, but keeping 2, enlisted Damien in her lessons. Damien adored the tactic of teleporting to his enemy, striking them with a blow, and then running away. Due to his limited magical resources, Thea stopped teaching him magic and instead focused on melee combat. Teaching both sides proved cumbersome, so she simply combined them. Since Batman's last name shouldn't be mentioned during introductions, Thea referred to Damian as someone else's child, much to the child's dismay. Shadow, understanding that such a young child was being forced to learn martial arts, simply meant that the United States was too dangerous and that a 6-year-old needed to learn self-defense, otherwise they wouldn't survive. The gentle Shadow proved quite effective against the child, and they bonded well. Furthermore, Shadow's basic melee combat skills were inherited from the Assassin's League, and their mutual sparring was beneficial. Occasionally, Thea felt lazy and simply let them practice sparring after their instruction, leading to rapid improvement in both. Many people don't realize that Shadow is played by Selena Jade. Haha, for the sake of this beautiful lady, remember to vote. Chapter 346 The Kryptonians are coming. The best aid during the learning phase is comparison. Shadow has a good foundation, and as an adult, she quickly grasps all kinds of knowledge, especially some Eastern martial arts. Damian's strength lies in his high starting point, and his physical fitness is improving every day. Whether it's the Ninja Master, Batman, or Thea, their martial arts can be said to have been passed down from generation to generation, and their teaching methods are also the same. He absorbs knowledge extremely quickly and is catching up with Shadow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Okay, let's take a break first, Thea interrupted the competition between the two. From the scene, Shadow still had the upper hand, but Damian had a lot of strange moves. He could maintain an undefeated record within 30 moves, but after 30 moves, he couldn't do it anymore. Thea, come and see, Felicity shouted, interrupting the teaching of several people. Just as Thea was about to reply, her pocket phone rang. Picking it up, she saw it was from an old acquaintance, General Ryan. She answered, but before she could say anything, the general on the other end launched into a barrage of messages. Please come to the Department of Defense as quickly as possible. Immediately, as quickly as possible, he hung up, but even in the brief communication, she could hear the clamor on the other end, like a market, with countless voices discussing and arguing. What happened? Thea muttered softly. General Ryan's dream of becoming Secretary of Defense had been shattered. Perhaps his reputation for human experiments had left him in tatters. His replacement was General Swanwick, a general who had commanded numerous U.S. military campaigns. A UFO is approaching Earth. Quinn Group satellites have detected it entering lunar orbit. Fortunately, Felicity had the answer. Aliens? Thea's first reaction was that they were demanding an explanation. Borrowing the medical pod, sending an evil gorilla out to wreak havoc on another planet, she'd done a lot of good things lately. But how could that be possible? Thea coughed twice, told them to stay home, and then donned her yellow lantern ring and flew off alone to the Ministry of Defense. Entering the minister's office, she found a small crowd, but she recognized them all: the new minister, Admiral Swanwick, several generals led by General Ryan, Amanda, and Martian Manhunter, disguised as the director of the Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. What's going on? Everyone in the room knew her identity. Taking off her mask, Thea asked the new minister, seated at the head of the table. The new minister was a black general. Thea had never spoken to him before, but when he spoke, his voice was powerful and decisive. 5 minutes ago, an extraterrestrial civilization entered lunar orbit. They're demanding we hand over an alien hiding on Earth. I believe you're the most knowledgeable person on Earth about aliens. What do you think our approach should be? General Swanwick was a bit overwhelmed. To be faced with such a dreadful situation so soon after taking office was beyond bad luck. Luckily, he knew Thea and hurriedly summoned her for advice. Thea scratched her head. There were so many aliens on Earth. Which one should I contact? Forget about the distant ones, there's one standing right here in our room right now. She carefully considered her words. Mr. Minister, did they mention that planet? Did they have a name? Several people in the room reminisced. They didn't mention the planet. They only mentioned the leader was General Zod. It was her old acquaintance, Amanda, who answered her question. General Zod. Thea breathed a sigh of relief. This guy definitely wasn't coming to see her. She wanted to ask Martian Manhunter's opinion, but the Pentagon, including many of the Sky Eye Society's key buildings, were equipped with high-tech products designed to prevent telepathy and mind control. Her telepathy was completely ineffective there. After a moment's thought, it seemed like nothing could be kept secret. I've heard of General Zod. He's probably from Krypton, a planet 271,000 light-years from Earth. Their planet exploded over 30 years ago. Some say it was the end of its lifespan, others say it was an invasion by advanced artificial intelligence, and still others say it was a massive explosion caused by Krypton's entropy. Thea was counting on her fingers, listing the possible causes of Krypton's destruction when the Black Minister interrupted. He didn't care who had blown up the other side's planet, he just wanted to know how powerful their military was. Miss Quinn, I'm very pleased to hear your extensive knowledge. But I'm wondering if they have any intention of conquering Earth. From what I understand, General Zod was a die-hard warmonger back on their planet. He conquered many civilized worlds and practiced a law of the jungle. He was a seasoned general. Thea shared her knowledge without reservation. Admiral Swanwick's heart sank at this, because he'd used the same principle of the jungle to deal with Iraqis and Afghans. Putting himself in their shoes, it wasn't hard to guess their intentions. Her mind was in turmoil, but she feigned composure. Can we negotiate with them? Not for any results, but at least to express her wishes, Thea pouted. What wishes? Wasn't that just surrender? She feigned righteousness and said, I'm willing to go, but you'd better bring someone with me. I can only act as driver and translator, not as the country. Damn. You're absolutely right. The high-ranking officials in this room, usually representing this and that, have all retreated when it's their turn to represent their country. Are you kidding me? Running straight up onto an alien spaceship to negotiate? They won't even be able to bring their ashes back, will they? Those who usually boasted about their prowess were speechless, their heads bowed, fearing they'd be called out for their deaths. Admiral Swanwick was also worried. The president had retreated to the basement, leaving him with full authority over external affairs. He also had to command the scene, so he shouldn't have gone. He glanced around, but no one dared to meet his gaze. The Eye Society and the Bureau of Paranormal Investigation weren't qualified to represent the nation. After some deliberation, he said, I'll go with you, Minister. Don't, Minister, think again. Several people whispered to him, but no one shouted, I'll go. They all feigned worry, but their tense bodies relaxed. Even Thea looked askance. Without a fight, she wasn't sure she could handle the Kryptonians, but running wasn't a problem. Whether with her power armor, her lantern ring, or a portal, she could definitely escape. All of this highlighted the new minister's courage. The dire situation had cornered him, but his decisiveness was also part of the equation. However, running with this guy would be a hassle. Thea glanced discreetly at Martian Manhunter, noting that he was playing it safe. In reality, if they joined forces with him and Superman, they could definitely take on the Kryptonians. But judging by his demeanor, he didn't seem to want to reveal his identity. Do I need to wear a spacesuit? Do you think I need to carry a pistol? The minister was almost leaving his last words at this time. While asking Shia, he instructed his secretary to hand over the things in the office to his wife if he didn't come back. Chapter 347 Negotiation. Would they need a spacesuit? Thea pondered, reaching out and materializing a respirator, handing it to him. Modeled after the planet Karuga, it can handle the air in most regions of the universe. Admiral Swanwick touched the seemingly tangible object, exclaiming in wonder, how do we get up there? Wait until I build a plane. Thea tried to see the distance. The other ship didn't have the technology to confine space, so opening a portal would be the quickest way. But he didn't want to reveal his abilities in front of so many people, and to show his Earth identity, he materialized an F-22. Come in, Thea waved at the black general. Does this thing have a firepower system? General Swanwick, familiar with his own plane, sat in as usual. After a few fumbling attempts, a thought suddenly occurred to him. It's all imaginary, all fake. Thea, knowing what they were thinking, immediately dismissed the idea. Hold on, we're going. Someone had already opened the office's roof. The layered, purely mechanical structure was claimed to withstand medium-range missiles. Thea controlled a materialized aircraft, ascending vertically, and after 1,000 meters above the ground, it flew directly towards the moon. The experience of flying through the atmosphere was a thrill for the minister, but his emotions were quickly replaced by a deep fear. He feigned composure and asked, will they not attack first? No, Thea replied firmly. She didn't really know, but judging by her impression, Zod was a man of leadership and caution. They were clearly there for a conversation, and he wouldn't turn them away. Mr. Minister, you're truly courageous, Thea said sincerely. As they drew closer to the Kryptonian ship, General Swanwick calmed down. His legs had been shaking like noodles when he first started the plane. At my age, I can't embarrass myself in front of a little girl like you, haha. General Swanwick discarded his politician's facade, revealing his true colors. He lacked Thea's strength, and he didn't know if she would care for him in a crisis. He cast aside all concerns, single-mindedly focusing on completing his mission. In some ways, he was a hero. Thea chuckled twice, but remained silent. They had already reached the side of the Kryptonian ship. Instead of attacking, the enemy opened the hatch and beckoned them inside. The ship was truly enormous. Thea maneuvered the aircraft inside and began to survey her surroundings. The Kryptonians were highly civilized. If it weren't for their own treachery, their physical prowess and technological prowess would undoubtedly make them a formidable force in the universe. Earthlings, what can you do? They were greeted by a woman in black mechanical armor, carrying some kind of translator, speaking Earth's English. Thea was delighted, saving the trouble of translation. She had already prepared for her escape should the negotiations break down. I'm General Swanwick, representing the Earth government. I need to see your leader. Now that the communication was flowing smoothly, General Swanwick began to tremble, his arms waving in unison, his tone revealing his determination and conviction. The black-armored woman seemed to communicate with someone inside via some sort of communication device. Wait here, she remained fixed, her gaze fixed on the two, especially Thea. What? Kryptonians, you want a duel? The Kryptonians' genetic engineering was incredibly advanced. And Thea had been planning to go in and observe carefully. Unexpectedly, they were so cunning, preferring their leader to personally meet them at the edge of the spacecraft rather than allow them to enter the interior. Thea felt a little frustrated, a little annoyed by the black-armored woman's fixed gaze. You're not Kal-El. Your abilities are truly remarkable. This isn't a physical form, is it? The black-armored woman wasn't angry, merely observing the aircraft she had materialized with curiosity. You're surprised by what you've seen before, Thea began, only to be interrupted by another muffled voice. Following the voice, a burly middle-aged man, about 1.9 meters tall, emerged. He had a very short beard, strong facial features, and a commanding expression. Fire, that must be some kind of manifestation. I hear there's a group in the universe calling themselves the Green Lantern Corps, but those are green manifestations, and this guy is yellow. They must be related, the middle-aged General Zod said uncertainly, glancing at Thea's manifestation. Thea remained non-committal, leaving the two generals to discuss. How do you leave Earth? General Swanwick spoke with a slightly depressed tone, but mustered the courage. Find Kal-El and the stolen Cephalon Codex. Zod was much calmer, as if recounting a trivial matter unrelated to him. What codex? General Swanwick didn't understand the word. He intuited that it must be some kind of advanced technology prized by the aliens, but Zod wasn't prepared to explain. The Black Minister could only look at Thea. From his expression, Thea knew he might be misinterpreting the situation, so she could only explain, it's similar to a human genetic map. Many alien worlds have it. Oh, General Swanwick's interest instantly faded upon hearing about the genetic map. Zod had initially wondered how an Earthling could know about their treasure book, but after hearing Thea's final words, he realized that many alien worlds possessed it. He had been busy for 30 years modifying spaceships to equip his men, and then came to Earth, where he was completely isolated from the outside world. Thinking of the Green Lantern Corps, Thea automatically became a well-informed Earthling in his mind. The two of them let the matter of the treasure book slip. If we hand you the people and the treasure book, will you leave Earth? This was General Swanwick's primary concern. I'll leave when I get it. I swear to Rao, Zod said solemnly. Swanwick turned to the well-informed Thea again, his eyes clearly asking who he was referring to. That's the god they believe in. Thea couldn't figure out what kind of gods these Kryptonian god and Martian god were. Did they really exist, or were they imagined by ordinary people, or were they just God's trumpets? She could only give vague explanations. You are very frank. As a soldier, you deserve respect. I agree to your terms, and you will get what you need, General Swanwick said and signaled to Thea, we have almost talked about it, let's withdraw quickly. Thea had no objection, she could fight in space, but her strength was not as good as fighting on a planet, and there was no benefit at all. She was just taking the blame for Superman. The mission was successfully completed. General Swanwick consolidated his position in the Ministry of Defense, and Thea also successfully established a connection with him. Amanda and General Ryan could stand aside next time. Chapter 348, Battle. Zod didn't stop them, and the return trip went smoothly. Who is Kal-El? Swanwick asked Thea on the materialization plane. His intuition told him that Thea likely knew these strange individuals. You've probably seen him too, but I don't know his name. The guy in the red cape during the last battle of Coast City was a Kryptonian. I wonder if he's the Kal-El they're looking for. Thea's words were half true and half false, and General Swanwick had a clue. He wouldn't have to search through the vast sea of people. This was good news. After the plane landed, General Swanwick walked back to the Ministry of Defense in high spirits. He was greeted by approving glances from everyone. Regardless of faction, bravery was worthy of admiration. For the first time, the Black Minister's personal reputation overwhelmed any dissatisfaction. Find this Kal-El now, the Minister of Defense issued a new order, and everyone began to work in a frenzy. Miss Thea, we'll need you for a while. The Black Minister and Thea had shared this shared experience, and the bond had grown considerably. They transitioned from addressing each other as Miss Queen to Miss Thea. Needing to solidify this bond and witness the Kryptonian Civil War up close, Thea naturally agreed. Not long after, Superman and Lois Lane arrived at the Department of Defense. Superman had surrendered himself, while Lois was half forced and half willingly arrested for her online claims that she knew the true identities of the Kryptonians hiding on Earth. Looking at the livid Lois Lane, Thea was speechless. She was coming to the Department of Defense to discuss press freedom? She had no fear. If it weren't for the face of her father, General Lane, no one would bother to negotiate with her. She'd better drink 2 pounds of truth serum first. Standing 6 feet 1 inches, his crimson cape billowing in the wind, Superman didn't surrender as he had in his original time and space. He hovered outside the Pentagon, awaiting their arrival. The minister, as if trying to persuade someone to commit suicide by jumping from a building, presented facts and reasoned with him, his words conveying a single message: Superman sacrificing his own interests for the greater good. Superman pretended to listen attentively, but in reality, he had entered a chat channel called Martian Manhunter. After leaving the Pentagon's high-tech shielded area, the group's telepathic abilities returned to normal. Since they knew each other well, Thea was also drawn into the chat room. Using Martian Manhunter's powerful psychic abilities, the three of them engaged in a telepathic conversation in full view of the crowd. Uncle Ron, are you sure you won't intervene? Thea had been wondering. With him and Superman teaming up, and her mere presence, those unsung Kryptonians would be finished in a matter of minutes. Martian Manhunter said firmly, I want to protect Earth, as an Earthling. I won't intervene unless absolutely necessary. What's a last resort, when this Kryptonian and all of you are dead? Thea rolled her eyes. She was clearly just trying to be a bystander, but this guy spoke so righteously. No wonder he spent his later years teaching psychological counseling sessions at the Justice League, cooking for them, and cleaning up after them. His slacking off was a new level. Kara Danvers wanted to come too, but I talked her out of it. Ron, she still needs your care. Superman's voice was a little sad. Between his own kind and the Earthling who raised him, he didn't know what to do. Perhaps he was just thinking about taking it one step at a time. Miss Thea, if possible, please help me look after my adoptive mother. Seeing him making his final words, Thea nodded in agreement. His mother was the peasant woman, wasn't her name Martha? Superman, with a look of impending execution, ended the three-way call. Afterward, he and Lois Lane shared a moment of affection. As he displayed his affection, he had no idea his future father-in-law, General Lane, was among the onlookers. While curious about the trembling old man, he realized this wasn't a game, and characters had no names above their heads. With so many other things on his mind, he paid no attention. He let go of Lois Lane and soared toward General Zod's ship. Is this the end? The Black Minister asked Thea quietly, after sending everyone back to work. Probably, Thea chuckled. This wasn't even close, but to avoid disappointing them, she told a white lie. Where's the tome they're looking for? Thea suddenly remembered. She shook her head, but he did remind her that Kryptonians have achieved the pinnacle of biotechnology, their people's genetic makeup reaching a level of perfection that, in some ways, resembles artificial gods. Superman's father injected the genetic map into Superman's blood, which, combined with the equipment on their Kryptonian spaceship, could be read. Both the blood and the equipment were essential. The original Chronicid was so devastated when Superman destroyed his spaceship, believing that all hope for Krypton was shattered. Perhaps he should have copied the data in advance? Their genetic technology wouldn't be of much use to him, but even if it didn't, it would be beneficial to Moira, Malcolm, and the others. But these things had to be done in secret, without the knowledge of these politicians. Thea secretly plotted her plan, time slowly ticking by. "Sir, 2 small spacecraft have entered the atmosphere," a lieutenant reported. "Calculate their impact point," General Swanwick demanded hurriedly. Thoughts of the aliens going back on their word and breaking their promises filled his mind, but he also harbored a glimmer of hope. If they landed in another country, he wouldn't have to worry about them. But the lieutenant's next words shattered his illusions. "Sir, impact point is Kansas." Ouch! Swanwick's face instantly turned a pale yellow, as if he'd eaten something expired. "Is it too late to declare Kansas independent now?" "I'll go check it out," Thea said, volunteering without waiting for him to speak. If she remembered correctly, Zod and his men were searching for the alien spaceship from which Superman's childhood had come. She'd promised Superman to look after his adoptive mother, so she had to show some respect. Kryptonians. Humph. As she flew, Thea felt her fighting spirit rising rapidly. She wanted to test the combat capabilities of her new armor. Accelerating, Thea completed her transformation, her silver-white armor covered by a bright red cape. General Zod entered the atmosphere, having flown from Washington, D.C., at about the same speed, but much closer. She checked Clark Kent's farm on the armor's onboard computer and arrived there first. "I'm Clark's friend. Old man, take cover. The enemy's coming soon." Thea removed her mask and waved to Martha Kent, who had bravely ventured out to investigate. The old lady didn't understand what was going on, but she still ran away with the dog in her arms. Chapter 349. The Powerful Kryptonian. The old woman, clutching her dog, hadn't even run 100 meters when 2 alien spacecraft landed, and General Zod and Phyra emerged. Both wore black power armor and long black capes, though Zod's was sturdier and thicker than Phyra's. He surveyed his surroundings before turning back to Thea. Her armor was distinct from the yellow-lit suit she'd worn, but the two recognized her by the aura of a powerful being. "Earthling, it looks like you're considering a fight with us," General Zod's stern face tinged with disdain. "You probably don't understand our true strength. I've conquered countless lowly planets like Earth in my lifetime." Thea put her hands on her hips and laughed heartily. "Kryptonian, let me tell you something too. My footprints are all over the universe. I've herded cattle on Karuga, I've fought on Oa. You Kryptonians have only conquered a few surrounding star systems. There are 3,600 sectors in the universe. Do you know which sector you belong to? I'm telling you, remember, you're Sector 2813, neighbors of Earth Sector 2814. Next time someone asks you, you can answer loudly, haha." She looked at General Zod with a look of a country bumpkin. "Shit," General Zod's face darkened, a mixture of anger and shame. Kryptonians had always considered themselves to be advanced civilizations, and whenever they conquered another planet, they looked upon the local natives with a look of concern for the mentally handicapped. Now the situation was reversed, and it was extremely painful, leaving General Zod with the illusion that he had been screwed. Unfortunately, he lacked the words to refute her, as he couldn't be certain whether Thea's words were true or not. The lantern ring could create unlimited wormholes, allowing them to warp between different regions. While their spaceship could also create wormholes, the energy required was insane, and they wouldn't do so easily. They had initially descended on the surface with such gusto, but were mistaken for bumpkins, dealt a blow that instantly reduced their power by 20%. "I won't argue with you. Hand over the tome." General Zod wasn't a man of great eloquence. He used to be condescending about Earthlings, but now he dropped all that, focusing solely on the tome. Thea was also puzzled. She remembered the movie where Superman walked into a trap, was captured, and had his blood drawn and his memory read, but he quickly caught up. She had been engaged in a long, drawn-out conversation with him, but where was Superman? Was it because Lois Lane didn't get on the spaceship? Did that take him longer to escape? If she hadn't come to Kansas, his adoptive mother would have been dead. Exhaling a breath of stale air, the white dwarf converter on her chest began to pump out a fierce energy output, illuminating the magical runes within. Her crimson cape fluttered without a breeze, and a sense of solemnity settled over the air. "Let me see how powerful you are," Thea declared, and the thrusters beneath her feet suddenly activated, sending her soaring into the air. In a sweeping arc, she unleashed a punch towards General Zod. General Zod roared, gathering all his strength to strike back. Bang! A muffled sound, no flash, no explosion, this was pure physical combat. From the two of them, The shockwave radiated in all directions, shattering Clark Kent's lawn and cabin. A red pickup truck was lifted off the ground, tumbling over 30 meters before landing, unsurprisingly a total loss. Thea somersaulted backward to neutralize the impact of the punch, while General Zod took a step back. The opponent's punch had a force of 1,020 tons, while our armor withstood 95% of the reaction force. There's a minor crack in the armor on my right arm, with 0.37% armor damage. Gideon, acting as the co-control system, quickly scanned the damage on both sides. What a race of jacks. They haven't even seen the sun in a single day, yet they possess such immense strength. It wouldn't be wrong to call them gods walking on the earth. I'll hold her back. Phyra, you go get the Cephalon Codex. The fierce confrontation destroyed the Kent family cabin, leaving Superman's childhood spaceship standing out amid the rubble. General Zod leaped high, launching a fierce attack at Thea, while shouting a warning to Phyra. You'd better come and help your general. Thea sprayed a barrage of freezing air across Phyra's path. No technological armor could withstand the absolute zero temperature, and Phyra was quite discerning. She paused for a moment, and Thea seized the opportunity, grabbing her arm and throwing her towards General Zod. General Zod wasn't strictly a bad guy, especially since he was only a general, with only 10 men under his command. He could call him General Zod, or Captain Zod, if he wanted. He couldn't kill his loyal subordinates with a single blow. He dodged midair, avoiding Phyra's direct line of sight, and with a deft tap on her leg, he shifted from a horizontal flight to an upright position. Phyra coordinated well with him, performing a delicate 180-degree mid-air spin and landing back on the ground. The two exchanged glances, each in tacit understanding, before lunging at Thea. Thea blocked Zod's whip kick with her left fist and grabbed Phyra's wrist with her right. She drew a dagger-like blade, stabbing and slashing. It was a completely different style from Earth martial arts. There was no distinction between real and fake moves, each was brutal and ruthless, leaving a slash in Thea's nuclear-resistant armor. Unconsciously, Thea's attention was drawn to Phyra. Phyra's martial arts were magnificent, a dance-like rhythm, yet within that graceful form lay a deadly attack. Zod, in stark contrast, employed a traditional Kryptonian fighting style, relying on strength, speed, and abundant stamina. He was tireless and fearless of injury, seizing any opportunity. Thea, even with her armor, was slightly inferior to Zod's in single combat. In a fair fight, she could easily hold her own for dozens of rounds, but with Phyra, who was no less powerful, she struggled. She had to resort to spraying ice from her freeze gun to thwart Zod's attacks. The ambient temperature dropped noticeably, and Zod and Phyra's armor inevitably began to malfunction. Damn it! Where's Superman? Should I retreat? A bit frustrated, Thea exchanged another punch with Zod. Huh? To her surprise, Zod's punch wasn't particularly powerful. Instead, it used the force of her blow to send him flying into the cabin behind him. Just as Thea was about to give chase, Phyra rushed forward recklessly, the dagger in her hand flashing with bright arcs of electricity. Even without the arc, it could cut through armor. Now the arc was definitely not for decoration. Unaware of its power, Thea did not dare to take it head-on and dodged twice in a row. Phyra completely gave up on defense, and her moves were aimed at her vital points. It was not difficult to guess what she was thinking. Which was to hold Thea back. No. The Central Codex is not here. With General Zod's roar, he suddenly jumped out of the wreckage of the wooden house. His eyes immediately turned to Thea. Did this earthling know something? But his peripheral vision caught sight of Martha Kent, who was hiding far away, and he instantly had an idea. Chapter 350. Phyra. That old woman must know something. Phyra, keep holding that earthling, I'll go get her. General Zod shouted so loudly that anyone within a 2-mile radius could conservatively hear him. This was his mastery. He not only communicated his purpose to his men but also disrupted Thea's movements. Zod didn't believe her, saying she'd come here to protect an old earthling, claiming they were nothing to do with her. It was a blatant conspiracy, and Thea was indeed affected, just as he'd predicted. The old woman hadn't gotten far. Thea surpassed Phyra in both martial arts and strength, gaining the upper hand. Her arcing dagger had already been knocked away by Thea. Hearing Zod's words, Thea was startled. This old American woman was truly fearless. She wouldn't even run after such a shattering fight. He kicked Phyra away and turned to look at Martha Kent. Oh my! An old woman, clutching a dog, was hiding behind a tree, her hands resting on the ground, surveying the battlefield. Did she actually think she was safe after running 300 meters? Seeing Zod about to charge, Thea, not bothering to deal with Fire, energized her thrusters to full power, ready to stop him. But something unexpected happened. Both Thea and Zod, their minds still stagnant, hadn't considered the existence of such unreasonable beings. A red and blue figure, tracing a line from a great distance, crashed into General Zod with a deafening sonic boom, sending the iron-blooded general flying several kilometers. Furious, Clark raised his casserole-sized fist and hurled a desperate blow at Zod's face. "How dare you threaten my mother?" The immense momentum sent the two hurtling past farms and roads, crashing through countless buildings along the way, finally stopping in a small town 5 miles from Kent Farm. Thea glanced at him briefly and then stopped watching. Superman still had his usual flaw: his attacks were haphazard. Zod's martial arts skills were far superior, but he could only barely hold his own against Superman's furious blows. His hood was quickly shattered, and the moment his skin came into contact with sunlight, his supersensory powers activated. A deluge of chaotic information flooded his mind, giving him a splitting headache and causing his fighting ability to plummet. Thea knew their ship would soon be picking up Zod. The next time Zod came to Earth, he would be no match for her. With his supersensory powers, super strength, heat rays, and a host of other abilities, it was best to leave such a formidable opponent to his fellow Superman. "Hey, your general got knocked away. It seems he's not that strong after all. Become my subordinate." "I admire your abilities." Fire, having been kicked, staggered to her feet. Having been pinned down by Thea for so long, her armor had been severely damaged, though it hadn't cracked. "Bullshit." Fire was furious at Thea's blatant offer of surrender. She didn't have supersight, but she knew Zod's vital signs were rapidly declining after being beaten by Superman, and that a ship was already on its way to support him. She cursed him, but a shadow still lingered in her heart. Had the invincible general been defeated? Thea, a master of brainwashing, sensed a change. Without proper guidance, this shadow would quickly be filtered out of her consciousness, but now was the time? They were in the middle of a battle. Fire was highly capable, intelligent, capable, and insightful. Plus, with her Kryptonian heritage, she was the perfect third recruit for Thea's Yellow Lantern Corps. As a longtime lieutenant, she was well equipped to handle most of the duties. Whether she took over the Yellow Lantern Corps or fought on Earth, she would be a valuable aid. However, all this needed to be done in secret. Superman could know a little. After all, they were compatriots, but the U.S. government must not be informed. Thea's Eye of Horus had already seen Kryptonian fighters pick up General Zod, while American aircraft were rapidly approaching. She no longer held back, channeling a flood of water attribute magic into her armor. Due to the influence of the shark god Camo, this armor was insensitive to all other attributes, and only water could be fully utilized. She tried to persuade the enemy to surrender, and they capitulated. Thea's persuasive tactics weren't that profound, so she planned to capture Fire alive and train her slowly. However, the enemy was formidable, not a simple melon to be picked and taken away easily. With the U.S. military approaching, time was running out. Previously, Thea would have had no choice but to give up and wait for the next opportunity. However, the armor's passive properties gave her a new option: naval combat. Underwater, her own power was greatly enhanced, while the enemies would undoubtedly be weakened. Furthermore, the seabed offered excellent concealment, so the Atlanteans were unlikely to report this to the Pentagon. "Follow me." Two deep blue magical tentacles extended from Thea's armor. As Fire stared in bewilderment, they grabbed her and flew her out of Kansas, heading south to Oklahoma and Texas. Fire struggled desperately, but the magical tentacles held her tightly, and she eventually followed Thea to the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. "What are you doing?" Fire roared. As Thea had expected, their armor could operate underwater, but its capabilities were minimal. It was merely a function. The extent of this capability was revealed by the alarm sounds blaring from her armor. "I'm going to show you the vastness of the universe. Your vision is too narrow. You have no idea how vast the world is out there." Thea spouted nonsense, swimming towards the deep sea. Fire was so enraged that she nearly spat out blood. Although she had heard this statement before, she still felt it was unjustifiable. It made the Kryptonians look like uncivilized natives. In the past, they'd always used this argument with a sense of superiority, but now the tables had turned. How could she not feel aggrieved? Crucially, Fire subconsciously believed Thea's words. General Zod had only vaguely known about the Green Lantern Corps, and out of caution, he hadn't argued with Thea, akin to tacit approval. Thyra, who had always viewed him as a leader, misunderstood the story as fact, subconsciously cultivating the notion that Kryptonians were narrow-minded. It could be said that General Zod's caution inadvertently helped Thea. Thea was an incredibly fast swimmer. Despite carrying a companion in Thyra's struggles, she still managed to reach speeds exceeding 1,000 knots, a speed no marine life or submarine could match. Thyra's suit was already severely damaged, and the immense pressure of the deep ocean exacerbated the damage. Initially, she managed to withstand a few blows, but by the end, her consciousness had faded, and she could only mechanically punch and kick. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.